Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. It's with great excitement that I finally get the chance to review Ultimate Spider-Man. If you don't know, I'm a huge comic book nerd and even bigger Spider-Man fan. I've read Spidey comics off and on as a child and have been reading regularly since 2009. If you ever need some info on my main man Spidey, then I'm generally the person to ask. Now, Ultimate Spider-Man is one of them controversial shows. You either love it or you hate it. You might even say it's the Teen Titans Go of the Marvel Animated Universe. I'm not actually in either camp though. Weird as that may sound, considering I just said I'm a big Spider-Man fan. See, from episode 1 of Ultimate Spider-Man, the show has somewhat rubbed me the wrong way. The whole concept of Spidey's cutaways is inherently a Deadpool thing. It also didn't help that season 1 wasn't exactly the best in terms of animation or writing, but one could generally make the same statement about Avengers Assemble too. Before you get on to me, I will admit that the show has generally improved every season, with the Web Warrior season being the best in my personal opinion. So I'm hoping that season 4 will continue to improve. So now we're finally going to discuss the 1-hour premiere of season 4, Hydra Attacks, part 1 and part 2. Whenever Spidey gets cocky in the comic books, that's usually when crap hits the fan, and it hits it really hard in this premiere. His friends are captured, Doc Ock joins Hydra, and more. From the trailers for this season, I had assumed that Hydra and Dr. Octopus would both be the baddies, but by the end of these 2 episodes, it seems that Hydra is defeated. So unless Doc Ock takes over with Arnim Zola stuck in space, this wasn't the epic premiere I was expecting. It's not a bad 2 episodes, but I was expecting a little bit more. What was awesome was the first cartoon appearance of the Scarlet Spider. Well, the non-Ben Reilly one.
I call myself Scarlet Spider, but that doesn't matter. You'll never see me again. I'm not part of your world.
It was really cool to know he'd be in this season, even if the show's usual tone doesn't truly gel with the character's personality. I mean, he's a dark and serious character, but either the writing or the voice actor made it come off very corny in this episode. So that was a bit of a letdown. It also is being set up that he's the first Spider. Now that could be some misdirection being thrown at us, as in the comics, he's a clone of Peter Parker. So I'm kind of hoping that turns out to be false. Mostly because while it would be a genuine twist, it would be kind of a waste of the character. Another interesting connection to the comic was Doc Ock's appearance changing to become more like how he looked when he was dying in Amazing Spider-Man issue 600. In the comics, he's been hit so many times by so many different characters that in the head that he only had so much time to live. I almost believed at the start of this episode that they were going to go that direction, but he actually transformed via the swarm.
The greatest enemies of S.H.I.E.L.D. have finally joined forces.
Well, okay then. Oh, and can we talk about the weird jump from episode 1 to 2? At the end of episode 1, yes, Hydra had defeated S.H.I.E.L.D., but then we go to episode 2 and Spidey starts talking about how his friends have been captured. We are shown later that this is what happened, but it felt weird because we, the audience, didn't see that occur, nor did Spider-Man. It's not a big deal, but it did bother me slightly. Now, there was plenty of action in this episode, and it looked pretty good. I still don't like the animation style the show uses, but it is kind of pretty to look at sometimes, if slightly generic. All of that probably makes it look like I absolutely hated this episode. Hate being a strong word. Actually, I'd say this was more of an average start to a season that sounded like it was going to kick all sorts of butts. I've said this before online, but this show's major problem is the tone it's going for. It has quite the hard time balancing the style of humor it's going for with the serious moments. It's like your typical Disney sitcom, where one moment things are funny, but then they try to get uber serious on you for a minute, and you can't take it seriously because 99% of the show up to that point had been jokes, and more jokes. I don't think I'll ever get used to or like Spidey's cutaways, but at least they've toned them down over the years, and that's good. I'm hoping that the rest of the season picks up and is better than these first 2 episodes, because the premise for this season honestly sounded spectacular. Well, that's been my review of the first 2 episodes of Season 4 of Ultimate Spider-Man. What did you think of the premiere, and do you have a favorite moment from the episode? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon, and all things late, because wow, I have been really behind on these reviews. I've been slowly catching up, as I did with Fairly Odd Parents, and just last night with Be Cool Scooby-Doo. Make sure to go check out those reviews if you haven't. I'm almost caught up, just in time for new episodes of Fairly Odd Parents this Saturday, or Friday, in fact. Anyway, let's get to the actual review portion of this video. I hate to start off a review with something negative to say, but let's just get it over and done with.
Yeah, that will not be my profile pic. Miles Morales here, you know, Spider-Man.
Nope. Come on, Marvel. First Spidey jacks Deadpool style, and now even Miles is doing it? Look, the whole fourth wall breaking thing is what makes Deadpool unique. That's not even remotely part of Spidey's repertoire. Why exactly did you decide to have Peter do this? Let alone Miles? Okay, negativity out of the way, for now. Besides that, I'd have to say that the third episode of this season, Miles from Home, wasn't half bad. It seems that we'll be slowly working up to the formation of Ox Sinister 6 this season, or rather the various versions he'll be using, as this episode was mostly about him summoning the Goblin from Miles' universe to help him kill Spider-Man. Now, honestly, I think this show never really had plans to utilize the Ultimate comic book universe because a lot of its cues are taken from it to form their show's own universe. It's a bit confusing, so let me try to explain. The Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon is only partially based on the comic book universe known as the Ultimate Marvel Universe. It's sort of this weird amalgamation between 616 and 1610, the designations for the mainstream Marvel Universe of the comics, and the aforementioned Ultimate one. That's why the Green Goblin is based on his Ultimate counterpart. But then when Spider-Verse came along and it was time to introduce Miles, all we got was a slightly different version of this show's own Osborn. Here's all 3 of them side by side. It's why I never really understood how Peter first reacted to this more terrifying version of his Green Goblin, because he wasn't that different in the first place, except the wings and the fire. But let's get back to the episode, which again isn't half bad, despite not really including much of Scarlet Spider, who we met in the opening for the season. I guess the writers felt we got 2 episodes of them, so it was time to focus the attention elsewhere. No, instead this episode involved Miles officially joining the Web Warriors, a plot point I was frankly shocked to see. I'm wondering if any other spiders from other universes will be joining, and if they'll play a part in confronting each new variation of Ox Sinister 6. I hope so, otherwise it's sort of a waste of those characters. While the show is fairly gorgeous to look at from time to time, I still stand by my opinion that I wish they'd gone for a more distinctive art style for the Marvel cartoons. There are quite a lot of beautiful camera angles in this episode, although this one action sequence with Doc Ock is kinda bad. Maybe if they sped it up, it looked more dynamic. And then there's the humor.
Man, this is easier than dodgeball in gym class with kindergartners.
First off, humor is extremely important in any Spider-Man story. Peter Parker uses humor to throw off his opponents or distract himself from any fear he might be feeling. Unfortunately, in my opinion, I feel like the writers of Ultimate Spider-Man have a hard time giving Peter something actually funny to say. I can honestly say there are very few times that I've laughed at something this animated Spider-Man has said. Or maybe it's just a fault of Drake Bell's delivery of the lines. I love the guy. I really do. I think he's a talented actor, but he's not the best voice actor, especially for Spider-Man. Now, you're probably asking yourself, wait, didn't you say this episode wasn't half bad? And you're right, but that doesn't mean it was amazing, or spectacular, or even worthy of being called ultimate. The season is starting off poorly, compared to the opening of Season 3 anyways. It's not horrible by any means, and it's still a step up from Season 1 and 2, but it's still disappointing. I mean, Marvel had 2 great shows prior to this, Earth's Mightiest Heroes and Spectacular Spider-Man. But they got so enamored with synergy, they decided to replace them for shows closer to the movies. And what we, the fans, got in return were mediocre shows. I'm sorry if someone from the show sees this, but I'm a big Spidey fan, and am pretty open-minded and willing to give a lot of new things a chance. But this show just doesn't get me as excited as its predecessor did. Switching to a more positive note, there were things I did like about the episode. Remember, I did say it wasn't half bad. I said the humor wasn't much up to snuff this episode, but there were some moments that did elicit a slight chuckle from me. This one exchange between Ancient Venom and Scarlet Spider towards the end of the episode. In my previous review, I mentioned some stuff Scarlet said didn't really work in the context of what the show's tone is, but this one, to me, did.
Where'd you dig this one up?
Yeah, says the guy Spidey found in the sewer.
I hate you.
And I also really love the sacrifice that Miles made. Responsibility is a huge aspect of any Spider-Man character, and in a show with a lot of misses, this one really stood out for me. Well, that's been my review of Miles from Home. It certainly wasn't the greatest episode, and that really disappoints me because I was really excited for this season. But the introduction of Miles to the Red Warriors was an excellent choice. I look forward to seeing what the next episode brings, and I really do hope that the season improves. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello, lords and ladies. Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. I know it was a bit harsh towards last week's episode, but likely I felt like this was an overall better episode. I'll get into why in a few moments. This week's episode, Iron Vulture, features the return of, well, Vulture, as he's been upgraded by Doc Ock. Now, last week I said that this show borrows elements from 616 and 1610. This would be one of those elements, except in the comics, I think it was Alistair Smythe who upgraded certain villains to take on Spider-Man. Some of them were Scorpion, Boomerang, and Vulture. So yeah, this episode heavily reminded me of that storyline in the comics. Although I don't really like this emo Vulture very much, I thought he was used to great effect in this episode. Plus, I really dug his two different color schemes this episode. They reminded me of comic book Vulture a lot. The only downside is he's voiced by Tom Kenny, same as Doc Ock, and when he was speaking from behind his helmet, he sounded too similar to Doc Ock.
Norman Osborn. Otto Octavius sends his condolences on your passing.
No offense to Kenny, who is an excellent actor, but it's just a nitpick. What really excited me was the introduction of Harry Osborn as American Son.
The Patrioteer. That's who.
Oh, sorry. I mean Iron Patrioteer. Which really doesn't sound as good as American Son, but oh well. That's usually the best parts of watching this show, or any superhero show in general. That's, seeing the elements from the comic books translated over into animated or live action form. Now, Harry defending his father from Doc Ock's latest attack also served as a really good lesson for Peter, who up to this point had been treating Miles like a little kid and trying to keep him out of danger. It's your typical Spidey move, although him almost getting Miles killed in the beginning of the episode wasn't. The point is, I approved of the lesson that he learned. He can't baby Miles who can handle himself. Hopefully this will lead to some notable team-ups in the future. There's also the reveal, or the tease in all honesty, that there's a spy in S.H.I.E.L.D. This one doesn't seem all that hard to figure out. All signs point to Scarlet Spider. He's the second most recent Spider to join the team, and the one whose identity the team still doesn't know. On the other hand, it could be a red herring. Or in this case, a scarlet herring? See what I did there? No? Okay. It's probably far too obvious for Scarlet to be the mole, so I'm hoping it's not the case. Maybe I'm asking too much from the show. The group dynamics, aside from Spidey's overbearing protection early on in the episode, have really cemented since the previous episodes, although we don't really see that much of it. The characters all have their role to play and quips to throw at each other. I just want to see one episode where they're all teaming up. It would be a fun time. Now, as I said earlier, I felt this was a better episode than last week's. It had better action sequences, it had a better story, and so on. I still don't approve of the cutaways, but I've put up with worse. And that's been my review of Iron Vulture. Little short video. My apologies. It's a very good step in the right direction this season. If you want to share your own thoughts on this episode, leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. When we learned that there was a spy in last week's episode, I didn't think we'd learn who it was for a while. But we did in this Sunday's new episode, Lizards. One episode is quite the turnaround for a traitor among you plot, isn't it? In fact, unless there's some twist in tomorrow's episode, I'm going to be pretty disappointed in this plotline. But more on who the spy is in a second. Most of the setup for this episode's plot revolved around the web warriors trying, and failing spectacularly, to sniff out this double agent of theirs. Of course, when I say they tried, I mean they tried in a manner befitting this show's tone. And by that, I mean comedically bad.
Me and the Web Warriors intend to use every chance we get to interrogate our fellow agents and find the traitor.
So, Power Man, what I hear you not saying is that you would not do something illegal if you couldn't not get away with it?
Is that English coming out of your mouth?
The baddie of this week was the old lizard himself, who ultimately ended up being nothing but a green-skinned red herring. Which probably would have been somewhat brilliant if it wasn't fairly obvious it wasn't him. And we'd had more than a couple of minutes to doubt his intentions. Maybe over the course of a couple of episodes. But this show tends to move fast. The idea of a bunch of lizard men running around was actually somewhat fun. It was almost as thrilling as your typical zombie outbreak plotline, just with deadly lizards instead. Watching as each of Spidey's teammates were turned amped up the tension more and more as the episode stretched on, and for that I will give this show some credit where it's due. However, it did feel a little cheap when Luke Cage, the only one who'd be impervious to being infected, was hit right out of the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier. I understand why he would need to be taken off the board for tension's sake, but when it happened, it didn't feel organic to me. Plus, if you wanted to, you could easily draw some comparisons between the plot of this episode to ones involving the Venom symbiote. So, by the episode's end, it is of course revealed that Rhino was a traitor all along. When you really think about it, it's the most obvious choice. Think of the villains Spidey has currently faced down this season, and which ones are notable members of the Sinister Six within the pages of the comic books. Heck, some fans have even pointed out to me that was already spoiled in promos for this season. Now if that's true, then yeah, that's kind of lame. Because Rhino being the traitor was so expected, I also found it a bit lazy. Well, maybe not lazy, that's a little bit harsh, but uninspiring. It would have been far more shocking for it to be someone else, someone closer to Peter. As I said above, I'm hoping there's still some kick to this plotline punch. Maybe Agent Venom is also the traitor. Sunday's episode is called Double Agent Venom after all, but it is more likely he'll be joining Ock's team undercover. Now, I don't watch this on TV much, so if there was a promo that basically said that, then my apologies. Now, before we end things off, it'd be irresponsible of me to not mention the special guests in this episode, Gemma and Leo from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And no, this doesn't mean those two shows exist in the same universe. While it was exciting to see them cross over into the realms of animation, I feel like the voice actors really phoned it in for this episode. Well, not both of them. It was more Elizabeth Henstridge who didn't seem that enthused. I get it, sometimes going from regular acting to voice acting can be difficult because you're in a sound booth and not doing the actual scene with other actors. However, you'd think the voice coach would have helped them through that, but maybe this was the best take they could get. So what's my take on this episode? Slightly above average, I'd have to say. I personally enjoyed the lizard infection plot, even if it was too similar to some past episodes. But the overarching traitor storyline left much to be desired. I'm hoping there's something more to it than meets the eye in tomorrow's episode, but I'm not going to hold my breath. And that's been my review of Lizards. What did you take away from this episode? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. This week's episode, or technically last week since I'm so behind on it, Double Agent Venom, essentially concludes, in my mind, the Who is the Traitor story arc. And much like the past few episodes, it was pretty underwhelming. I've already said before that the quick reveal of the traitor was unsatisfying, so I won't rehash my complaints about that. But there is still more to be disappointed over. Namely the fact that after betraying his friends, he almost immediately has a change of heart and helps save Venom, who was kidnapped at the tail end of last week's episode. You might be wondering why that's such a bad thing, but there just wasn't any stakes or remotely any drama over this betrayal. We just jumped from one story beat to the next without really exploring any of it. Near the end of one episode, we find out there's a traitor. Oh, who could it be? Oh, we find out who it is next episode, and it's pretty much the only legitimate suspect. Okay, maybe there'll be some team drama as Rhino agonizes over betraying them. Or maybe he doesn't even care and it causes a lot of heartbreak for the team, right? Oh, never mind, he redeems himself in the next episode. Cool. I don't mean to sound so mad over this, but comic books are an incredibly thrilling medium, and it sucks to see this episode mostly fail to be entertaining. Yes, there's action, and what this show passes off is tension or drama, but it never truly pulls it off in my opinion. Look, I have every bit of respect for the writers and the other various team members who work on this show, but wow, this season has really let me down, especially after Season 3 pulled me back into the show. And it freaking has the Scarlet Spider in it, a character I have wanted to see in animated form for God knows how many years. I'm happy he's in this, but he's not enough to save the season from its inherent dullness. Scarlet Spider, at least this incarnation of him, is a dark character. He's brooding, he's done some bad things, and he's had a hard time trusting people, which is honestly why his character feels very out of place on the show. And in the comics, despite being almost the polar opposite of Spidey, it somehow managed to work. But here, it doesn't. Not really. It's so jarring to see them interact with each other. The saving grace of this episode was the villain, and that's only after he's taken over by the symbiote and becomes a Kraven Venom mashup, lovingly referred to as Kravenom by Spidey in the episode. The design given to him is simply fantastic. I love how he takes on the appearance of a lion, and his fur becomes a lion's mane. You can just tell he's even more menacing than he was before. Personally, I've always dreamed of seeing Spidey's rogue gallery exposed to the Venom symbiote ever since the PS1 Spider-Man game. Although in that game, it was the Carnage symbiote, but you get my point. Symbiote plus supervillain equals lots of fun. A few other nice moments in the episode was the inclusion of Spidey's spacesuit, which is possibly straight out of the comics, and the other moment was Scarlet using his claws to stab Arnim Zola in the torso. Marvel cartoons tend to misuse characters who have claws because violence, but this was still a great moment regardless. I'm sorry if this review comes off very harsh, mostly because it was, but it's better to be honest than to lie and say this was a good episode when I didn't feel it was. What's bad is that this was probably the worst episode of the season for me, and the quality of them has been at an almost downward trajectory since the first episode. Hopefully, and I've said this every review, but hopefully the rest of the season starts to look up. That's been my review of Double Agent Venom. Let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Today, that's my review of the Ultimate Spider-Man episode, Beached. And guess what? This episode wasn't that bad. It was certainly nothing amazing, don't get me wrong, but compared to the past few weeks, it was a step back towards good. When I sat down a few days ago to watch this episode, I actually didn't make it past the title card. I was just so bored with the premise of this episode, and in fact, by the time Peter and Cho landed on the island, I was still fairly bored. I'm glad I did manage to finish it this time around though. A lot of the complaints I had with this episode was really the same old stuff I tend to have with the series overall. The cringy, less than humorous dialogue, and, as a fan stated earlier in the comments, it's all flash and no substance. Much of those went towards me very much hating Amadeus Cho in this episode. I get that's his character, the overly clinical scientist who views life as a series of numbers.
He's a chaotic variable that needs to be stopped, and you need to recognize that.
You can't reduce everything to numbers and formulas.
Heck, that's pretty much the theme of this episode. And that's where we kind of get to the good parts of the episode. There was a lesson here for Cho's character, and if I even had the slightest bit of faith left in this show, I would say that this will inform his decisions in later episodes. Not gonna hold my breath though. Plus, we did get to see old Sandman again, and it appears, much like his character briefly did in the mainstream comics, he's reformed. I'm hoping that he might join up with Silver Sable's Wild Pack at some point. I don't think either her or her team has made an appearance yet. Make it so, Marvel. Make it so. While the action in this episode still is not the greatest thing, we do get some nice, memorable sequences involving sand ninjas, and not the Naruto kind either. Which I'll admit, kind of excited me. I just wish there was more to this episode than just a watered-down version of the first episode that involved this show's version of the Sandman. But as I said, not a completely poor episode. But I'm probably only saying that because I'm comparing it to last week's episode, so maybe I'm a bit biased. And lastly, while not actually a complaint, just an observation, what happened to Venom? Or Scarlet Spider? Or Miles Morales? Wouldn't they have gone looking for Spider-Man and Amadeus? Can they not fly? Or get something to take them to that island that's not even very far from Manhattan? But again, not really a complaint. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this review. Not much to say, but then again, it wasn't much of an eventful episode either. Let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments below, and I'll see you soon for more Cartoon Hangout reviews. Hopefully, not as late as this one. Take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. I feel like a pattern is setting in with my Ultimate Spider-Man reviews, where I do them a week after they premiere. I don't mean to do it that way, but maybe I'm just not looking forward to more disappointing episodes. Luckily for this episode, Anti-Venom wasn't all that bad. Yes, there are quite a few things that ultimately disappointed me or I felt were handled poorly, but overall this was a decent episode, at least compared to past ones. As the name implies, this is the first appearance of Anti-Venom in the show.
Help me!
Harry! Harry, are you okay?
In the comics, Anti-Venom formed because of Mr. Negative healing him of his cancer and the remainder of the Venom symbiote. Then, when the old Venom symbiote crawled back onto him at a later date, Anti-Venom was created. Of course, this show is still not introduced Eddie Brock, and has thus started substituting Harry Osborn in that role, and that is one of the disappointing elements of the episode. Anti-Venom doesn't have the same impact he did in the comics. There, he was fused to Brock, and they went around curing people, including the new host of the Venom symbiote at the time. Now, he's a creation of Doc Ock, messing with the symbiote. It's still extremely poisonous against Venom, but that's about it. That's what I thought was handled poorly in the episode. What was decent, or alright, was how it amped the tension up in a way that not even the Rhino portrayal did. That's probably because we at least have some more of an investment in Harry's character than we did with Rhino. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of things that could be done better with this character, but this episode did make things even more personal for Peter. With both of his friends in coma-like states, he's going to be wanting to bring the pain to Doc Ock. Sadly, I think that's one of the few things I liked about this particular episode besides the action being pretty good this time around. Nothing too spectacular, but not as average as past episodes have been. And the last really good thing about this episode was the introduction of Michael Morbius, aka Morbius, the living vampire. Not because he was particularly used very well, but just because even the slight promise of us getting an episode where he becomes a vampire is really exciting for me. The rest of the episode was either below average or just plain bad. I don't want to go off on a tangent about those because we'd be here longer than I'd like, so I'll just keep it brief. So Norman manages to break into the Triskelion, but didn't get into any trouble. The rivalry between Agent Venom and Harry was frustratingly bad, mostly because I hate how this show goes with an even dumber Flash than the comics. At least by the time Flash becomes Agent Venom in the comics, he has served in war and matured. And those are just a few things I disliked about the episode. With that out of the way, that's the end of this review. Overall, it wasn't incredibly boring like the last episode, but it still barely rises above average. The season has just been a disappointing one, especially after the somewhat nice opening episodes. That seems to be something recent Marvel cartoons have in common. They start off strong, but then take a huge drop in quality. As a Marvel fan, that's really hard for me to admit. Let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. I'm hoping this review goes up sooner than my previous Ultimate Spider-Man reviews. I know I've been extremely behind lately, but I am attempting to do a better job. Speaking of better jobs, Force of Nature was markedly better than the past few weeks of Ultimate Spider-Man. In fact, I'm confident enough to declare this a good episode, and nothing makes me happier than saying that. After so many average or below average episodes, I was starting to dread watching new episodes for fear it was just going to be another episode I have to review negatively. Now, the episode isn't perfect, but the one complaint I have is fairly minor and doesn't truthfully factor much into how I feel about the episode. We'll touch on that towards the end of the review. For now, let's talk what this episode is about and what it did better than the previous episodes. In Force of Nature, the Web Warriors head off to investigate a distress call from a hidden SHIELD facility thinking it's the missing Nick Fury. Now, up until this point, it doesn't seem like anyone is really that worried about Nick Fury. Either that's a plot hole, or maybe it's an issue being addressed later, or maybe even on Avengers Assemble. Someone who watches both shows will have to let me know. But obviously, Fury isn't there, and instead they accidentally release Morris Bench, aka Hydro Man. Hydro Man isn't exactly a top-tier Spider-Man villain, so it's pretty cool to see them establishing him as a threat and a possible Sinister Six member in this iteration. And he's used to great effect in this episode, with quite a few different cool uses of his powers. My favorite is when he descends on the Web Warriors in the form of rain.
You can't stop me, Spider-Man. Fury's gonna pay for keeping me in prison all these years.
Just that, combined with his voice multiplied, was so eerie. And it's not often I compliment this show, so that's actually saying something. He's not as creepy as his Spider-Man the Animated Series counterpart, but considering how that version acted, I'm not very surprised that characterization didn't make its way into this one. Plus, having his body transformation be similar to Sandman works better visually, I think. That's probably how it's done in the comics, but I'm just used to seeing just his arms or bottom half of his body be water. On top of that, the action wasn't half bad this episode. Yes, a lot of it was just them hitting at water, which isn't terribly easy to make look cool, but it worked fairly well. Not to mention the dialogue wasn't as cringy this week. Yes, Drake Bell still annoys me as the voice of Spider-Man, but it was pretty easy to ignore and enjoy the conversations otherwise. The only thing that I didn't like was the reveal of Scarlet Spider's identity, or at least his face. I figured this would be that big moment where Peter learned that he had possibly been cloned or something to that effect, but nope, didn't happen. This is obviously the Kane Scarlet Spider, as one can tell by looking at him unmasked, but nothing was said about him kinda looking like Peter, and if Aunt May didn't even notice... And then there's him being named Ben. I guess it would have been odd having them refer to him as Kane, especially if named by May, but it is something of a letdown. I'm hoping that the whole Scarlet Spider mystery still pays off with him getting the name Kane later on and being revealed as a clone. Otherwise, it'll be another example of this show attempting to put a twist on a comic book element and in the process cheapening it altogether. Huh. I guess it wasn't quite so minor a complaint. Still, the episode was good. Not the most amazing, but I definitely enjoyed watching it compared to some of the previous episodes. And that's it for this review. If you have any thoughts on this episode's events, please let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the review, consider leaving a like, and take care. Hello, lords and ladies. Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. It's been a while since I did any regular reviews due to a long bout with the flu, but now I'm truly back. I've got a lot of reviews to catch up to, but that's what this week is all about. A new review will be out every day until I'm back up to speed. Hopefully. Today, that's my review of episode 10 of Ultimate Spider-Man, The New Sinister Six, Part 1. It's no secret that I've ragged on this show for pretty much the entire season, and I still believe that's earned. There have been good moments, and even a good episode here or there, but largely I've not enjoyed this latest season. However, this recent episode, coupled with the previous one, is actually fairly good. It's got a decent story and heart, even if it still has the usual missteps the show is known for. After 10 episodes, we finally get to meet the Sinister Six, which does lead to some mostly satisfying battles, even if some of the villains are voiceless or just grunt. So, while the battles feel great, and look great, the battle banter could have been better here. We also get some heartwarming moments early into the episode where Peter and friends have a party for Aunt May. I'm curious where the rest of Peter's friends are, though. It's a minor complaint I've seen some fans bring up about the season as a whole. Obviously, none of them expect them to use the characters every single episode, but it does come off like Peter is abandoning one group of friends to hang with another. Still, one of my favorite moments of the episode had to be this one here involving Peter, a backup cake, and Ben.
Based on the fact that I actually know you, I expected this, so...
Backup cake?
Backup cake.
Dude, thanks for being someone I can always count on.
You're just lucky you have a cool hand.
Who apparently is the Ben Reilly of this show. Now, I've already said my piece about how I feel about that particular change, so I won't dredge it up again. While the episode does some things right, and overall feels like a much better and deserved episode, there are some really odd moments here or there. For example, the decision to drop Hydra Man off in the middle of the ocean seems like a big oversight on the hero's part. It seems likely to me that this incredibly dumb, amateurish move only happened so the writers could have it lead to the big epic moment later in the episode where he crashes into the shield base. I feel like they could have just had him show up in the middle of the battle like that, but whatever, that's just me. Then of course there's the, and here comes the spoilers, big shocking reveal that Scarlet Spider was a spy all along, possibly shocking no one but those who have never read a story before. I've already said the red herring of it being Rhino never made any sense to me, as there was no real emotional connection there. He'd been seen in the background for more times than I can count, and the moment never felt real, as he'd been given no character development or growth recently. So obviously the culprit had to be Scarlet Spider. Heck, I may have already said I thought it would be him earlier in the season. I guess I called it, huh? So it definitely wasn't shocking, but it did have that emotional connection to it. Ben had been built up over these past few episodes and has slowly become friends with everyone. Of course it would be him. And this moment at the end... It definitely sent chills down my spine, as we've never really had a scene like this in the show to my recollection. That's both a compliment and probably a critique. We're 4 seasons in and the show has finally made me feel something. Please do more of that. Please. Now, I'm not sure where they'll be taking the story forward now that Peter's identity is known to Dr. Octopus, but the past 2 episodes have been decent, so I'm hoping the rest of this storyline will be of higher quality than the earlier parts of this season. And that's been my review on episode 10. What were your thoughts on the not-so-shocking reveal of Ben being the traitor? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to the Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Here we are again, a new review for Ultimate Spider-Man Season 4, namely the second part of the new Sinister Six story. I said part 1 was decent in my last review, so does this next episode live up to or improve on it?
This is the most terrible day of my life.
No, not really. I don't like sounding like a broken record when it comes to Ultimate Spider-Man, but I came away from this episode feeling very disappointed, which isn't anything new. This episode dragged on for most of its runtime, and much of the action, if you can even call it that, was equally dragged out and boring. There was no sense of excitement in Spidey's early showdown with Doc Ock, or even his several battles with Scarlet Spider. Sometimes the show does have cool battles, and then other times I wonder what the animators were trying to do with some of the characters' awkward flailing. It's not as bad as Spider-Man the Animated Series, mind you, where they couldn't even really show much of violence, and so characters just jumped around like idiots, but not by very much. You would think that as the finale for the spy arc, there'd be some huge tension and heartbreaking moments between Scarlet and Peter as they fought each other, but they never really seemed to happen. The one good moment in the episode was, spoiler alert, the sacrifice of Ben Reilly. Despite never really earning that heartfelt moment a la Captain America and the first Avenger, it does at least attempt and somewhat succeed at being a tear-worthy scene. Oh, and maybe the moment where Flash fights off Scarlet with his wheelchair lasers. That was pretty silly, but genuinely cool moment for him, even if once again it wasn't animated all that well, or at least choreographed. Any goodwill the last 2 or so episodes has earned were sadly dashed with this episode. The show just seems to be the only show I've ever really reviewed that squanders the ample amount of source material it has. You've got decades of history to explore and bring to the TV screen, and you decide that not only will Ben Reilly have Kane's personality, but he'll also actually not be a clone? I know the show's defenders will say something along the lines of the writers reimagining the characters in fresh, new ways, but if you're going to use one character's personality, why not just use that character? It'd be like introducing Jessica Drew, but giving her Maddie Franklin's personality and outfit. Sure, they're both Spider-Woman, but they're not interchangeable. Besides the 2 examples I gave, I can't really come up with any other positive moments to talk about in this episode. Most of what happened from Doc Ock tossing Spider-Man around to Sandman duking out with Hydra Man never excited me at all. If you like this show, more power to you, and I'm not saying you can't enjoy it, but I sit here thinking more and more these days, why couldn't Marvel have just let us keep Spectacular Spider-Man for a few more seasons before giving us Ultimate Spider-Man? Its target demographic was kids, but it was smartly written, acted, and animated in such a way that not only could kids find something to enjoy, but so did teens and adults. They didn't have to sacrifice one audience to please the other. At a time where fans are becoming more and more dissatisfied with the state of the Marvel comic books, it sucks they can't find some solace within the animation side of Marvel. Now, I don't like ripping on the show, if that's hard to believe. I would love very much to be eager to watch every new episode, but I'm not. I'm not even sure if I'll continue to review the rest of the season. That's how bad the season has gotten for me. Anyway, that's it from me. I don't want to make this review any more negative than it already is. I've found some positive moments to talk about, but mostly it's just been bad. So why don't you let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments below. Maybe you found something positive about the episode that I missed. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. After the negative review yesterday, you probably think I have even more bad things to say about this show, but no. Actually, this episode was really good. Great, if I wanted to be generous. First off, we finally get to learn what happened to Nick Fury. Because, you know, waiting 10 episodes and having almost no one seriously question what happened to Nick is good writing. But I'm giving it a pass. Mostly because of how fun this episode was. Sure, Drake Bell still continues to be my least favorite person to voice Spidey, but at least the writers gave him some lines he could deliver, some of which even managed to be slightly funny.
Bonehead, where'd you get your costume? A Halloween discount store?
The episode also had the added bonus of giving us a fun team-up adventure with Triton, aka Savage Dragon Kid, making this honestly first time I think I've heard him even talk. I feel like he was introduced in Season 3's later episodes, which was when I mostly zoned out. If I'm wrong, well, I'm sure someone will love to tell me so. His numerous interactions with Spidey throughout the episode easily made the entire episode for me. If he'd been absent from the episode, this would be at most a decent one. What was interesting was seeing a more serious Spider-Man. I put that in quotes because the show's idea of serious is a bit different than what I'd say is serious. The episode spent quite a bit of time having Triton, a character part of a race called the Inhumans, who apparently aren't very humorous, attempt to get the old Spidey back by quipping himself.
No, I do not even enjoy salad. Okay, so I'm not as good at quips as you, but apparently you quit.
Even if his jokes weren't funny, it was really their unfunny nature that made them so funny. Oh, and don't get me started on how he refers to Spider-Man as Spiderman. What makes any Marvel show or movie fun are the Easter eggs or cameos of characters and locations that hardcore fans of the comics will recognize. This episode had this with the inclusion of Madam Web. If you've seen Spider-Man the animated series, you're no doubt familiar with her. Much like in this episode, Web has the ability to see all possible futures and has aided Spider-Man and his extended family numerous times in the comics before her death in Amazing Spider-Man issue 637. Which is why I was a bit puzzled why they utilized the second Madam Web, Julia Carpenter, instead. It's not a criticism per se, just me pondering the creative decision that led to the recent iteration being used instead. It's not like the Julia version is even that active in the comics as of late. Without getting too into the details, Julia Carpenter was the second Spider-Woman, whose costume design even inspired the look of the symbiote costume that Spidey wore after Secret Wars. She's not referred to as Julia, though, in the episode, instead only be called Madam Web, and having a costume inspired by the original. So I'm wondering if we'll actually get to see any more of Spidey's extended family within the show, either this season or next. Characters like Jessica Drew, Maddie Franklin, or even Anya Corazon. I wouldn't mind coming back to review this show if Season 5 was all about him meeting these characters. I mean, he's already met some of the alternate universe Spider-Man characters. It would be nice to see him meet some of the in-universe Spider-Family characters. Marvel also pulled a deep cut and brought back Meccano, although looking much more Asgardian/Fear itself inspired than his original appearance. Before we move back to discussing the events of the show and not just cool little references to the comics, I'd like to point out this moment here.
Is that Doc Ock as a good guy? Doubt that's a high probability.
For any comic book fans, that's clearly a reference to how Doc Ock eventually became Spider-Man and subsequently a good guy. Now, if that's the rest of this season, or even potentially Season 5, I could be back on board this show because I definitely want to see me some Superior Spider-Man. As I said before I geeked out a little on comic trivia, we are finally reunited with Nick Fury, who has been missing for most of the season. Almost similar to how MCU Fury was also missing, and with an eerily similar reason for running, having to do with Hydra, and a tiny black box. Not a lot is explained, so I'm going to assume we'll return to the Nick subplot later in the season, which probably isn't much of a good thing considering it took us this many episodes just to get someone actually looking for Fury. Of course, this is Ultimate Spider-Man, so there is going to be something to criticize, and that's mainly how everyone is acting happy so soon after the supposed death of one of their team members. Hey everyone, Scarlet's dead, but wanna play some volleyball? I'm not expecting the entire episode or episodes to dwell on it and be depressing, but that's just something I had to point out. Luckily, most of the episode was still good, so I guess that makes up for it a little bit, but it's still something that I had to criticize. The comedy in this episode was really on point, and not in an overly slapstick way or via annoying cutaways, but due to the characters' interactions with each other. This turned out to be a great episode coming off the abysmal previous one. Not necessarily a sign of good things to come, but at least it didn't make me depressed knowing I'd have to write a review on it. Anyway, that's been my review of episode 12 of Ultimate Spider-Man. What did you think of the episode? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching. Take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. And holy crap, this episode may have been the single best episode of this season. If I weren't reviewing this show, and the past episodes had made me really question whether I would keep watching or not, this would be the episode that brought me back. See, this episode involves Carnage, and shockingly enough, this show does the creepy character justice.
Carnage is chaos!
Well, as much justice as one can do when it involves a character who is a mass murderer, so obviously some things can't be shown on television and aren't likely to happen, such as him slicing and dicing his way through people. He does use various weapon extensions of himself that classic Carnage is known for though, so that's a plus. Now, if I had one complaint though, this would mark the second time this season alone the show has utilized elements of the comics they already utilized earlier in the show. For example, we got Kane's Scarlet Spider outfit because an earlier season had Flash wear the hoodie version already. And now, we're getting a more accurate to comic Carnage despite Peter having been turned into Carnage either sometime in Season 2 or Season 3. Still, the writers perfectly nailed the psychotic traits of Carnage. Heck, while they were at it, we got multiple cool comic book Easter eggs. First, we finally get to see Morbius in all his living vampire glory.
Morbius and Ock are so weird.
Flash even says it at one point in the episode. While this is certainly a more bat-centric design instead of his vampire one in the comics, it was still really great to see him transform. My only disappointment with the show's treatment of the character is that he's no longer sympathetic, as he once was in the comics. There, he was more of an anti-villain or anti-hero. He needed blood to survive and was always searching for a cure with the help of Spidey on occasion. Here, he's always been a villain, so I doubt that dynamic with Spidey will be explored like it was in the comics. And then, the one that got me pretty excited, or nostalgic really, was when the Carnage symbiote took control of Doc Ock in a way really similar to the PlayStation Spider-Man title.
Ock, you look different. Trying some new skin cream?
This was such a fun little throwback to a really classic Spider-Man game that I almost wonder if maybe it was just a coincidence. Either way, if you grew up with the title, you're sure to find some other similarities between that game's plot and this episode's. Namely, with the ending of the episode, as Carnage had blown up and subsequently infected what seems like a lot of New York, or at least the surrounding area. Let me tell you, that moment had me actually gaping and saying, "No way!" It was so awesome. And if there's one thing worse than an army of Venom soldiers, it's definitely Carnage ones. Now, as I said above, this was a great episode. An amazing one. Excuse the pun. It had some great writing as Flash struggled to get his Venom symbiote to listen to him, and Carnage was deliciously crazy. The jokes weren't grating to listen to, and it had some great action scenes to boot. Plus, it kicks off what I can only pray will be a good story arc with Carnage now infecting a host of civilians. I've been let down before with great starts, but awkward second parters though. So please, please, Ultimate Spider-Man writers, don't let me down again. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, but Mary Jane actually appeared in this episode. I was just complaining about this, or at least I did in one of my reviews for Season 4. And is it just me, or does Mary Jane always look different each time she makes her reappearance in the show? I'm pretty sure she does, along with other characters too. Go look it up. I'm too lazy, but hey, she definitely does look cuter. And does it seem like there's some romantic tension between these two? Watch this scene and tell me if I'm crazy.
You should really come visit Harry. And me.
I will. First chance I get.
It's been good to hear your voice.
You have no idea.
Did I miss an episode back in Season 3 where something happened between these two, or what? If I did miss an episode, then it's out of nowhere and ultimately is one of my complaints about the show not focusing as much on Peter's life and just focusing on Spidey's. So, what did you think of this episode? Let me know in the comment section below, and I apologize for how late this review went up. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. I guess this review is the first official video of Cartoon Hangout Season 2, huh? Pretty cool, right? If only it wasn't just Ultimate Spider-Man, and it was one of the other newer things that we were doing, but it's okay. So, I was pretty positive about the opening to the Symbiote Saga last week. Does Part 2 live up to all my hype? Well, a bit of yes, and a bit of no. Knowing that the animation this week utterly sucked. That or it was just the video player I was watching it on. But then again, it was Disney XD's official site, so it can't be that, right? I'm not sure if some other team handled this animation for this episode, or what, but large parts of it just looked really bad. But I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I'm just going to blame the video player that Disney XD uses, so yeah. Luckily, if that was the case, that was the only negative aspect of this episode, or the biggest negative aspect anyways. Everything else was either good or okay. Other than an odd opening to the episode where Spidey's unconscious, we pick up sometime into the Carnage invasion, and even the Avengers have been transformed, although we only get to see Hulk. I guess they were wreaking havoc in the city elsewhere. Like last episode with MJ appearing, this episode, another group of mostly MIA characters get more of a limelight. Cloak, Dagger, and Iron Fist all show up to help Spidey out, and it's a pretty cool moment.
Don't mess with S.H.I.E.L.D. Academy!
Their moment in the sun is still a bit too fleeting for my taste, especially given how little they've helped Spider-Man this season, but I'll take it for now. While their inclusion was welcome, I wasn't as enthused about Captain America and Hulk dropping by, even if it did lead to some more cool action sequences and a Carnage-controlled Hulk dubbed Chulk by Spidey. Part of me gets why the writers added them into this episode, because if they're going to have a city-wide invasion, it does make some sense to show that the Avengers are aware of it, but it still felt a little unneeded, and maybe instead of Cap and Hulk, we could have just gotten more of the S.H.I.E.L.D. students helping out. Either way, it wasn't the worst thing that happened in an Ultimate Spider-Man episode, and I do admit some scenes with Cap worked rather well, and I couldn't imagine them with some other character, so maybe it worked out for the best. Even Mary Jane got into the action, so to speak, and helped guide uninfected civilians to the streets of New York.
Whoa! It's MJ!
Yeah, didn't you know? Even my non-Academy friends are heroes.
People of New York, Mary Jane Watson reporting. Here's the lowdown on how to safely navigate the streets away from this carnage mess.
Although the specifics of that are lost on me. However, it is nice to see MJ take on a bigger role, even if it was kind of cheesy because she hasn't really been that important a character in Peter's supporting cast much these past couple of seasons, and that's a shame considering the history these two have in the comics, even if the hacks over at Marvel refuse to acknowledge that. Another positive about this episode is we finally get a more accurate role for Anti-Venom. As I mentioned in my review of his debut, he became an anti-hero of sorts and would go around curing people of diseases and even helped out during the Spider Island event. So that's exactly what he does during this episode, even if he's also being fought off by Spidey and friends for also wanting to cure Venom. I mean, as disappointing as that is, it does at least somewhat fit the anti-hero description and leads to some fun moments. There's one moment in this episode that is equal parts good and equal parts bad, in my opinion, and that's Harry's supposed sacrifice. We're not even that far removed from the episode where Scarlet sacrificed himself, so it's hard to really sit there and care about this moment, especially when, spoilers, he isn't dead. So that was maybe a less than stellar mark on this episode, even if it does lead to probably the single best moment in the episode, Peter unmasking himself to get Harry to listen to him.
Then what about Peter Parker? You're my best friend, Harry. I know you're in there. You have to fight this.
It was such a great moment and actually pretty heartwarming, which is then followed by the more hilarious moment of Flash unmasking himself to Harry.
It's okay, Flash. He knows.
Wait, Flash Thompson? Well, this is awkward. Is everyone we know a superhero?
Dang, Pete, what happened to the superhero code? You can't go around revealing other heroes' identities just because you did. In conclusion, not the best follow-up to the first part, but it wasn't a terrible episode, which is probably the best I can hope for when it involves this show. And lest I forget, there was one cool Easter egg, and that was Shriek being turned into Carnage. If you read the comics, you'll know that Shriek was an ally of Carnage and helped him go on some of his killing sprees. If you'd like to read up on that, just find the Maximum Carnage comic books. And that's it for this review. Let me know your thoughts on this episode, and how about a question to end this video? What hero or villain would you like to see get the Carnage symbiote treatment? Comment down below. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello, lords and ladies. Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon, and the review of the conclusion of the Symbiote Saga. Before I went into this episode, I had unfortunately been told that I would dislike it, as it was a bad episode. Now, I really do appreciate when you guys care enough to comment, but please keep anything remotely like that to yourself. I enjoy going into episodes completely clean of any influence. So maybe it was already my low expectations, but I didn't think this was a bad episode. While part 2 wasn't bad by any means, it wasn't as good as the opening to the saga. Part 3, on the other hand, is a really solid episode. Sure, there are some points that weren't that great, but I'll get to those in a second. Like Part 2, we're dropped right back into the plot with not much time passing. Peter does mention it's been a day, but that almost feels incorrect. But who knows, maybe it has taken that long for the Carnage symbiote to collect enough of itself to become a symbiote kaiju of sorts. That's probably one of my favorite moments of this episode, if just for the concept alone and not really the execution, which is a bit lacking in the episode. They battle this Carnage Titan for only a few seconds, and then it splatters over their school, and it's on to the next part. It seemed like a genuinely missed opportunity to have the finale include them battling a giant-sized Carnage. Heck, they could have even brought in the American Kaiju from New Avengers to battle it. Or even better, Leopardon. I'm not suggesting they somehow shoo in Takuya Yamashiro. That wouldn't really make sense, but maybe it could have been something Amadeus Cho was working on. I don't know, I'm just spitballing here. It's just that Cho hasn't really had much of a role these past several episodes, and this could have been his way into the episode. The Stan Lee cameo, like all of his cameos, was amazing. I am seriously going to miss this man when he passes away. No. Don't think about it, Archaic. You only make yourself sad. Anyway, it's always a joy when Lee makes time to come in and record some lines, because he has a great speaking voice and usually delivers his lines much better than you think he would. Watching him battle his way through several chibi carnages was hilarious and a highlight of this episode. Now, as boring as you think restricting the bulk of this finale to the school would be, it's actually pretty interesting, even if there are some brief lulls in the action for jokes. Which didn't all work, but flashes did.
Ugh, this is just like that dream I used to have where our school turned into a vampire's stomach.
You had that dream too?
I was joking.
Oh, yeah, me too.
The dude was on fire in this episode for some reason. I was expecting this to lean heavily into a horror vibe, but it never really did that, which is, again, a disappointment considering the Carnage character lends himself very well to horror, even more so than Venom. But I'll forgive that because we officially got Carnage MJ.
The Carnage Queen is in complete control. Carnage is order!
Or the Carnage Queen, which isn't the coolest name, I'll admit, but whatever. For any fan of the Ultimate Spider-Man comics, this could be a reference to how she was transformed into the Demo Goblin within the comic books. At least she's got a much better design than that one, and I think it was smart to differentiate between regular Carnage and the Carnage Queen. It gives the design a more distinctive look, more unique. Now that I think about it, it could actually be a role reversal. See, in the Ultimate Spider-Man comics, it was Gwen who became Carnage after she sort of died. It's a little confusing. You'll have to go read it to figure it out. Oh god, are we now never going to get Gwen? Because I've always wanted Gwen to appear in the show so that she could be Carnage. Part of me wants Gwen to appear, but then the other doesn't want the show to introduce her, ruin her, and then forget to include her in mini episodes for seasons at a time. But moving on, I really did enjoy the latter half of this episode, especially more than the first half. I mean, it is honestly retreaded ground with Peter having to help a friend, in this case MJ, control the symbiote by revealing his identity. When we just got that in the last episode with Harry. So that part I can see how it's a little annoying, as it's just a little plot point that just keeps being used over and over again, but it felt a lot more emotional for him and MJ than it did for him and Harry. Probably because the show is now in full-on romance mode with these two, as evidenced by the end of the episode. Now, I still would have preferred a build-up to this moment, but the show has the hardest time balancing Peter's social life with his superhero career. So again, to reiterate, I'm left feeling rather pleased having seen this saga. After being harsh towards the season since episode 1, it feels great to have more nice things to say than bad. Yes, the show still has its many flaws, but this saga of episodes was very spectacular. If you only watched one set of episodes this season, I would recommend these. The action, for the most part, was good. The emotional moments stood out for once instead of being dulled by the slapstick comedy that ruined seasons 1 and 2 for me. And they finally freaking gave Mary Jane, you just hit the jackpot Tiger Watson, a decently important role in the story. Yes, it's not the best use of her character, but after forgetting she exists for a season, I'll take it. And oh god, that ending, I'm not going to spoil it, even though I've never really held back on spoiling anything in these reviews, but it's probably the only moment at the end of any of these episodes in the show that has made me stop and go, okay, yeah, I need to see the next episode. It was creepy and pretty well written. I won't say the episode was perfect, because it's not, but if the remaining 11 episodes of this season can channel the energy and fun this saga had, then maybe season 4 can be saved. Capitalize on that ending, keep the action and comedy as tight as it was in this saga, and please focus more on Peter's normal life. When you spend too much time focusing on the mask, it gets a little boring. And that's been my review. What did you think of the episode? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you could, please consider supporting me on Patreon. I just recently added 2 reward tiers, so go ahead and click on the card on the screen and check it out. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello, lords and ladies. Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. As you well know, if you've been watching these reviews, I've been very harsh with this season of Ultimate Spider-Man. Sure, lately I've responded better to more recent episodes far removed from the Sinister Six plotline, but clearly I don't look on this show favorably. With that being said, I was beyond excited to learn that the next 4 episodes being released were Spider-Verse related ones, aptly titled Return to the Spider-Verse. The Spider-Verse theme of Season 3 is what pulled me back into the series in the first place. They were the only worthwhile episodes in that season, in my personal opinion, and I'm hoping that'll remain true for Season 4. In a move that actually surprised me considering the show in question, this episode circles back to the fact that Peter and Miles destroyed the Siege Perilous earlier in the season. That was back when Ock was attempting to recruit Ultimate Green Goblin. You know, the more comic book accurate one. It shocked me because I'm not exactly used to the show doing a stand-up job with their continuity and storytelling. In fact, before the previews for this episode, I didn't even think they'd return to the Spider-Verse. I just assumed the final episode would have Miles return home, and that would be the end of things on that front. So yeah, color me surprised. And even better is that I think this Spider-Verse arc might surpass the first one. In the first event, the only connective tissue between episodes was the Goblin traveling between universes collecting, what was it, spider blood or something? Now, don't get me wrong, they basically just swapped the Green Goblin and Spider Blood out for the Wolf Spider and the shards of the Siege Perilous, but the character is honestly more fun and there's a bit of mystery behind his identity. Despite the previews probably spoiling it for everyone. Because screw giving the fans anything to theorize over, let's just tell our viewers who Wolf Spider is. But then what else should I expect from this show? Either way, even with the identity of Wolf Spider being fairly apparent, I like the idea of a spider being the antagonist the main characters have to deal with.
On my world, I'm called the Wolf Spider. Ah!
Spider powers?
At this point in time, I've stopped expecting any comic book accuracy with this show, so it comes as no surprise to me that this show's version of Blood Spider has almost zero connection to his comic book namesake, who was a villain who appeared in only 4 issues. In this episode, he resides in a more Victorian world overrun by vampires led by the Lizard King, ultimately feeling more like Marvel's version of a mix between Batman Gotham by Gaslight and Red Rain. It's actually not that bad of a take, and I enjoyed seeing a somewhat horror-esque tale right off the bat. I just wish we could have seen if this Blood Spider was Michael Bingham or just a Victorian-era Peter. Heck, I feel like we learned barely anything about this world besides it being overrun by vampires. How did Lizard become the Lizard King? Why did Marvel choose this as a reason for why Blood Spider went by that name?
They've given me the name Blood Spider because they want to feed on me.
I just feel like this incredibly interesting world wasn't done justice. I know there's only so much time you can cram into one episode, but surely this could have been a two-parter. Compared to the rest of this season, I'd say this episode was really fun and a good time. I enjoyed watching it. That's not to say it was without mistakes or things that rubbed me the wrong way. One thing that was even dumber, I think, than the reason for Blood Spider's name was the show clumsily avoiding the idea of him killing vampires.
Destroy them? I wish. I dust them every night. They just respawn later.
So, instead of the stakes killing them, they just... What was it he said? Dust them? And then they just respawn later? Seriously, Marvel? You can apparently kill off the Scarlet Spider, but the undead dying is too much for you? I don't know. Maybe that's a nitpick, but I was heavily rolling my eyes when I saw it. Oh, and I probably got way too excited at the Leopardon Easter egg. I think it's so funny that I bring him up just one review ago, and then he shows up in an episode. Okay, Marvel. I'll give you that one. Really good job. Now, freaking put him in one of these episodes. As for the rest of the episode, I do think the pacing was a little bit off, maybe a little bit too quick. We just jump right into the whole universes colliding thing without much build-up, but for the most part, it was a satisfactory opening to what I'm hoping will be a very good story arc. And heck, it's kind of cool to see this Spider-Verse storyline somewhat referencing the events of the comic book storyline Time Runs Out, which involved the universes slamming into one another and causing incursions. Maybe a better written animated universe will slam into this one and take it out. What? Was that too harsh? Anyway, those were my thoughts. What were yours? Leave your hate comments down below because I look forward to them. Thanks for watching and take care. Hello, lords and ladies. Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. In episode 17, Return to the Spider-Verse Part 2, we're treated to a twofer. Two crazy adventures for the price of one episode. And let me tell you, it's a pretty great value. Like I said in my review last week, the Spider-Verse episodes are always the best parts of this show. And this episode continues that trend, starting us off with an adventure with Webbeard.
Only two ways off of this island. The easy way, or the hard... No, wait, I mean there's only one way off of this island.
This part of the episode was probably my favorite. It was comical from start to finish, and the design of this universe really reminded me of some other show I've seen, but I could never put my finger on it. I think it was because of how the arms of the characters look. I don't think I've fallen in love with an alternate Spider-Man as fast as I did with old Webbeard. He's just so weird and lovable. Not to mention he's voiced by the talented Will Friedle. At least that's who it sounded like.
What are you, putting on some kind of pirate accent? It's more of an affectation. People expect it from me.
Now, you might think it weird that I criticize earlier seasons for the same type of humor on display in this episode, but the difference is this cartoony pirate universe justifies it. Seasons 1 and 2 of the show did not. Now, the latter half of the episode, the Wild West universe, was also really good, but for entirely different reasons. The humor was a little downplayed compared to the pirate universe, but it was still there and it really worked. I don't know how the series gets the humor so wrong in its normal episodes, but then you get episodes like these and it magically starts to work. It helps when you have excellent voice actors breathing life into these characters like the Wild West Spider-Man.
How about we talk this one through, civilized like?
I'm not sure if they gave him a name or not in the episode. I'm not familiar with the voice actor behind him, but he easily can handle serious lines and comical ones. There was also a little bit more action in this one, with the spiders facing down Doc Ock Holliday, best name ever, and the Phantom Rider. I'm not a huge Wild West fan, but I think this character really captures the old Lone Ranger vibe. He wore all white and was somehow really tough to beat, and he didn't talk. And for it to be Uncle Ben all along, What a really great twist. I never saw it coming. Through the episode, I think I was expecting Wolf Spider or another alternate universe Spider-Man, but this was a lot cooler, and it allowed for a vulnerable moment for our Spidey, who, of course, doesn't have a bin to return home to. In a series that often botches its more quiet, serious moments, it finally got one right. If the rest of this story arc could be just as funny and well written and action-packed as these past 2 episodes have been, I could easily see myself coming back for a season 5. No, I'm kidding. No. I'll watch it, but I'm definitely not reviewing the show again. Anyways, that's my review of this episode. Let me know what your favorite moment was down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. With Return to the Spider-Verse Part 3, the show has decided that instead of visiting a brand new universe, Spidey and Kid Arachnid would instead revisit a world Peter has already been to. While it is a tad bit of a letdown to already be returning to universes visited in the first Spider-Verse arc, much like a gamer would dread having to backtrack to parts of a game he's already been through, at least their adventure in it is really different. That being said, this definitely won't be making my top favorite episodes list anytime soon. This episode sees the introduction of 2 characters the writers of the Marvel Animated Universe couldn't find time to do within the Prime Universe, one of Hulk's mini personas, Mr. Fix-It, and the crime boss, Mr. Negative. It's cool to see both of these characters, but it's sad that they're wasted as alternate universe counterparts. Plus, I don't think they even got Negative's powers right. But I suppose that can be chalked up to him getting his abilities from the Shard and not how he did in the comics. That's honestly not the only negative aspect of this episode, though. The beginning of this episode had me remembering what show these episodes belong to, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah, at first I was all, ah, I'm in a wormhole, I'm freaking out. Then after a while you're like, ugh, this is a long wormhole.
I cringed so hard at the opening for this episode, and every fiber of my being cried out for better voice actors. Please, dear God, writers, stop feeling the need to come up with funny dialogue for Peter and Miles as they travel between universes. You can just as easily show a brief clip, have Peter recap the events of everything again, but then just have them appear in the next universe. I really don't need reminders that maybe Drake Bell, a fantastic actor in his own right, should consider not being a voice actor. Or that instead of getting Donald Glover to reprise his role as Miles, you told Luke Cage's voice actor to talk a little bit higher. Okay, maybe it's time to move on to what the episode got right. Well, I did like the conflict between Spider-Man, Miles, and Mr. Fix-It. As shallow as it was slightly intriguing to see Miles side against Peter. Sort of like in the comics. I do understand wanting to not let people die, but at the same time it is an alternate universe with its own Spider-Man. I'm sure it'll survive. Unlike Mary Jane. Who it is heavily hinted at in this episode died off screen prior to this episode's events. So, I guess it's fine to kill her off, but in the Prime Universe, no one really dies. It's not that good that I felt more over a character dying off screen that we only met once before, more than I have for any of the show's other attempts, or lack thereof, at dramatic stakes. Dang, there I go again being negative. Wait, you don't think maybe Mr. Negative somehow touched me and therefore has corrupted me? That would conveniently explain my negative feelings towards this episode. Guys, that's gotta be it. No, I kid. Criticism aside, this wasn't as bad as an episode as some of the other ones this season, but it definitely is the worst of the Spider-Verse episodes thus far. I suppose it doesn't help that this universe was always the more boring of the lot. The comics do a much better job with this particular universe without making jokes about how the denizens of the universe apparently don't know what color is. Spider-Man and Miles, I get. That's because they're from another universe. So, in conclusion, it's nice to see some underutilized Marvel characters, but they feel wasted by being alternate universe characters. I'd much rather they actually be in the Prime Universe. The episode also reminds me of the more horrible episodes this show can give us, and that's depressing. But the action was good, the tense rivalry between Fix-It and Spider was interesting if not perfect, and Miles being turned to stone gave me a breather from his annoying voice for a few relaxing minutes. But what do you think of this episode? Do you too share my sentiment that it's the weakest episode of this arc? Or did you find some other positive things about it? Let me know down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. So this is it, the last episode of the Return to the Spider-Verse arc. Does it stand up? Well no, not really. It's actually a rather lame episode and incredibly disappointing on a few different fronts. First, let's talk about Spider-Gwen. She's a pretty cool character, even though in the comics themselves I think she's been recently written terribly. But then what Marvel character has escaped the team of writers and editors' ineptitude these days? But anyway, Spider-Gwen is from an alternate reality, where she, not Peter, was bitten by a radioactive spider, and Peter himself becomes the lizard and died. This caused the police to mistrust her, obviously, and she ended up on the run from not only them, but other heroes. In the Spider-Verse event within Amazing Spider-Man last year or the year before, she got to meet the mainstream version of Peter, and this was a significant and somewhat emotional encounter for the both of them, seeing as they both lost their respective friends. So they kept trying to protect each other when really neither of them needed it. It was a fun little moment within Dan Slott's okay storyline. When I realized that she was going to appear in this show, I already knew the encounter and her very character was going to be diminished. What's the point of even using Spider-Gwen? While we do get something like that encounter with Gwen talking about losing Peter,
I was friends with the Peter Parker here, the one who died.
It's an incredibly small one and isn't reciprocated by Peter, as he hasn't even met a Gwen on his Earth yet, or lost her. The entire concept gets watered down, much like every character or storyline in this show. Instead, we get a Gwen who resides on Miles' Earth, technically making her Ultimate Gwen. This definitely infuriated me. As you all know, I've been really wanting Ultimate Gwen Stacy to appear, and now there's probably no hope of that. Unless the writers are going to do it backwards and introduce that version in the next few episodes or the next season, but it doesn't really make up for that. Plus, this Spider-Gwen doesn't even have powers. She gets it all from technology, including a digital spider sense?
So, web shooters, digital spider sense, gloves, and boots with magnetic grips.
What even is that? Oh, and that world's Aunt May is basically her Oracle. All of this would have been cool on any other newer Spider, but the writers literally sat down and said, hey, instead of doing a faithful adaptation of Spider-Gwen with only a slight tweak, given we haven't introduced Gwen in the main universe yet, let's just do the opposite. Ugh. The one good thing about Spider-Gwen was, besides the writers' screw up, Dove Cameron did a really good job voicing her and made her come alive.
Huh? Oh, no, my name is Gwen. And I'm trying to be a hero like you two.
If I were to ignore all the dumb things this episode did, I could almost say it was a good episode. But I can't, because this episode didn't stop at just messing with Spider-Gwen's origins unnecessarily. This episode also had the dumbest reason for having part of Spider-Gwen's concept around. Since Miles disappeared, apparently villains have acted like heroes in order to fool cops or something, so now cops just trust anyone wearing masks. Okay, cool, let's see more of that. Oh wait, that's just a lame excuse to have that particular element from Gwen's comic. What even was the point? And while the idea of Gwen hiding her identity from her comp dad would have been interesting, if just ripped straight from Batgirl, I mean, Spider-Gwen is just Batgirl, right down her hipster shoes, it gets resolved so badly. Her dad goes from hating vigilantes to having a talk with Miles' mom off-screen and becoming more understanding. What a 180. Oh, so we don't even get this poignant scene from the actual Spider-Gwen comics then. More fun. And now we come to the second to last lame thing about this episode. Wolf Spider. Or should I say, evil Peter Parker?
In every universe, Peter Parker stands for heroism and responsibility. Except for one.
As if that was a shock. I told you already that Marvel spoiled that in the previews leading up to this story arc. Not even just previews for this episode. They literally showed this character's face off in the previews for the entire story. I'll admit, I was wrong about it ending up being Doc Ock inhabiting Peter's body, but the concept is pretty close. Down to him using spider arms on his back like Doc did in Superior Spider-Man. Except they're more gross because they're actual spider arms and not mechanical. You know what would have been more interesting than evil Peter Parker? Doc Ock as Peter, having destroyed the heroes of his reality. That sounds like a cool idea worth exploring, yeah? Well, that's apparently not as interesting as the whole evil doppelganger idea that's been done to death. Which could have had a modicum of potential had it been more explored, but it's just another letdown. I had such high hopes for Wolf Spider, but he really could have used more screen time. Honestly, this entire story arc could have used more space to breathe, maybe another episode or two. Heck, one fan even suggested that they could have continued this arc into season 5 and had Wolf Spider be like the big bad for either half that season or the entire season. Wouldn't that have been a cool idea? But no. What happens next? Everyone goes home, Nick Fury pranks Peter, and the whole thing just ends. What a terrible episode, and a disappointing end to what started off so great. In the original Spider-Verse arc, we got to meet a bunch of Spider characters. In this one, we still did. But then they show us only hints of characters like Spider-Punk or Leopardon and a few other cool characters from the actual Spider-Verse comics. Only for none of them to get any real screen time. I was so excited at the prospects of seeing some of those characters from the comics come to life on the screen. But nope. Here's a watered-down Spider-Gwen and a really dumb villain. You know what? I'm going to end things off here before I just launch into a huge rant about this show. I do have a topic video in the works comparing this show to past Spider-Man cartoons, but that's going to have to wait until the final season 4 episode airs, so I have a little bit more material to work with. I will try to end off on something positive, so some highlights in this abysmal excuse of an episode were, again, the lovely voice acting of Dove Cameron as Spider-Gwen, the incredibly too brief appearance of Spider-Punk and the other spiders, and the one scene where Wolf Spider is strong enough to almost bring the police building down. If we'd got more scenes like that, maybe I'd have liked this episode a little bit more. Sadly, the writers of the show do what they do best. Start off strong and end on a low note. If you have some thoughts on this episode, leave them in the comments. I always read every comment, but then that's still fairly easy to do at this point. Anyway, thanks for watching and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. I'm in a bit of a rush today, so this isn't going to be an incredibly in-depth review of Saturday's Spider-Man episode. Just wanted to warn you before anyone comments about the length. Also, please get your 420 jokes out of the way as soon as you're able. So, the superhero genre mixes pretty well with the Halloween season, especially Marvel with characters like Doctor Strange or Host of Monsters. And this episode is actually a pretty good Halloween episode. Starts off a little rocky for my taste, but it quickly smooths things out and gets to the good stuff. The jokes were also more on point in this episode than any this season. It really surprised me that I laughed at a couple of them. Baron Mordo also sees a return, but it doesn't really feel all that dramatic. I barely knew that he'd even vanished if it weren't for the episode reminding me of it. I also don't feel like it really explained too well how he ended up where he did or gained the powers he did, but I did like what he does with the powers early in the episode. Sadly, the episode is more focused on Spidey's fight with Baron Mordo than any of the Halloween things that could have been done. But that's fine. The fights were relatively entertaining, especially once their imaginations played a part. It was a really good episode. Not the best Halloween episode, but I think you may enjoy this better than the last attempt the show did at a Halloween themed episode. And that's my quick review of Strange Little Halloween. If you have any thoughts on this episode, please leave them down below and I'll take a look at them. Thanks for watching and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. If there's one good thing to come from this series ending, besides the obvious, it's that these last remaining episodes have actually been some of the best episodes of the entire season, maybe even the entire show. Episode 21, Spider Slayers Part 1, is another good start to another of Ultimate Spider-Man's mini story arcs. Whether that will remain for the rest of the episodes, who can say? But just to get this out of the way, it seems like I'll have to take back some things I had said in early reviews about Scarlet Spider. From the appearance of Project Kane to Doc Ock's vague hints about his past life, it actually looks like Ben is shaping up to be at least somewhat similar to his comic book origins. Just, subtract the Jackal and add in Doc Ock and Hydra. Of course, I do stand by some of my criticisms regarding this season's treatment of the character, such as this episode being the only time anyone has even mentioned him supposedly dying, or, because this is on Disney XD and death is forbidden knowledge to children, being destroyed.
I'm serious. My friend Ben, the Scarlet Spider, was destroyed saving the city. I can't go through that again.
In the most unneeded exposition dump, Peter drones on about Ben's sacrifice to Mary Jane. I get she hasn't heard it, but it still ended up being a recap in dialogue form. At least it's somewhat better than the cutaway version. There had to have been a better way to convey that information. My only other criticism, and it's a small one, is Mary Jane's Ultimate Spider-Woman design. Personally, I'm not a fan of her being Spider-Woman either, but her design feels way too similar to Scarlet Spider's. I get it's a little bit different, but still, surely they could have made it stand out even more from his. Besides all that, this episode really grabs you and doesn't let go. From Spidey's first encounter with the Synthezoid Kane, all the way to Doc Ock explained to Scarlet he had a past. It was all really good and pretty well paced, and the fight with the other Kanes felt really tense and terrifying. Well, for this show anyway. Even with Mary Jane there, it felt like they could have all died, or been destroyed, whatever. So yeah, really good episode with only a couple of gripes on my end, one of which is just a matter of taste and not necessarily a mark against the episode itself. There's so much potential with this story arc. I'm really excited for it. I just hope the writers don't muck it up as they have sometimes done in the past. The Peter and MJ dynamic is really interesting to me, and I hope they continue to explore that as the episodes continue. I suppose it's too bad we're only a few episodes away from the finale of the season and the end of the show, because it would be cool to see them explore her as a superhero more. But anyways, what did you think? Let me know down below. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. I'll admit that it took some effort to force myself to keep watching this show. The reason for it being late doesn't really have to do with that, but it didn't exactly help that the show leaves much to be desired, in my opinion. And at first, it seemed like this episode was gonna be a boring one. It started off with a silly recap, and it just wasn't very entertaining the first few minutes in. Admittedly, the concept of working with Dr. Octopus wasn't entirely a bad thing, but it just didn't do it for me early into the episode. There were a few good moments, such as revealing he had a code that he lived by and he could be slightly trusted. And it was kind of comical watching Spider-Man react to that realization, that he maybe doesn't really know Doc Ock that well, outside of him being a villain. The other upside to the episode was it gave us a more comic book accurate version of the character, and that was pretty awesome to see unfold. This one was actually closer to the one within the pages of the Ultimate Spider-Man comic book and not the mainstream one. So kudos to the writers for building towards Ultimate Dr. Octopus. He looks pretty badass. Hopefully there's more of him in the next episode, which I've yet to watch, obviously. This episode also introduces us to the titular Spider Slayers. Besides having cool designs, one of which was seemingly based off Spider-Man's future Foundation outfit from the mainstream comics, and providing a decent threat, this concept also left something to be desired. The characters really felt lifeless and one-dimensional. Almost fitting considering their synthezoid nature, which I guess is this show's version of clones. At least it's better than Dan Slott's Reanimates. I just wanted there to be more to them, but I think that might be asking too much. So for now, I'm going to chalk this one under my personal preference and say that while I wanted there to be more to them, they, again, were designed pretty well and provided a decent challenge for the characters to overcome in this episode. I'm just hoping to see more of Scarlet Spider and the Spider Slayers, although they may need new names after this. Elsewhere in the episode, MJ goes to get the rest of the Web Warriors. Now, this seemed like it was going to be a much bigger deal based on the previous episode, but they really only arrived to slightly assist Spidey in the last leg of the episode. Ultimately, they did very little in the way of plot, or really anything at all. Scarlet managed to regain control thanks to Spider-Man, and he stopped the Slayers. So this part of the episode didn't really add much, other than attempting to have a cool action scene before the episode wrapped up. And this was just a nitpick, but I found it unnecessary for MJ to attack Agent Venom or Iron Spider in order to prove herself capable. It just felt unnecessary, like I said, and really dumb. So, a few good moments coupled with some bland ones add up to an okayish episode. It wasn't startlingly bad, but I wasn't pumping my fist in the air over how great it was either. I'm looking forward to the conclusion because I have no idea what they could do next. I've avoided the previews for now, and while I am weeks behind, I'd like to remain spoiler-free. Thanks. If you'd like to check out some of my previous Ultimate Spider-Man reviews, just head on over to my Cartoon Hangout Season 2 playlist. You can find them there. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello, lords and ladies. Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. It's been some time since I last reviewed Ultimate Spider-Man, and for a good reason. I still don't really like the show, and when life got in the way and I fell behind, I didn't really feel like ever coming back to it. But I knew I'd end up regretting it if I never fully completed reviewing this season, so here I am again. The final episode of the Spider Slayer arc isn't exactly the gangbuster finale I was hoping for. Kane was never that great of a foe to begin with, and it's not until the climax that he gains something of a unique and crazy design. The episode ends up going with a mystery meant to make it seem like Scarlet is still a traitor, which ends up being a fairly boring way to end the story. Not that the story was ever that great to begin with, but still, I was hoping for something more than we ended up getting. Plus, not only did I not buy the thin mystery plot, but I was incredibly annoyed with how the various characters mistreated Scarlet. We get it. He betrayed the team and all, but he also sacrificed himself to save Manhattan. That apparently doesn't count for anything, especially the dumb Flash Thompson, who is still my least favorite version of the character for reasons I have likely already gone into episodes ago. Something else to mention is how much S.H.I.E.L.D. still feels like a ghost town. You barely see anybody but the Academy students. Like the animators gave up on making the most heavily armed building the Marvel Universe has seem populated. Probably a small complaint in the grand scheme of things, but it's just been eating at me. And don't get me started on the wasted potential of the Spider Slayers, who seemed as if they would have had more to do at the end of the previous episode, but basically turned against the team when Kane returned. I will admit a positive about this episode is that we get more than a few great action scenes when said betrayal occurs. So there's that. The episode wasn't entirely bad though, don't get me wrong. In fact, I'd say while I'm disappointed in the lackluster finale of this story arc, it could have been far worse. Again, we got some pretty cool fights between the students of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Spider Slayers, not once but twice, the latter of which was more fun than the first. It was also fun seeing the characters interact with the Spider Slayers pre-betrayal. So much could have been done with the characters, but with the series coming to an end, I guess there wasn't room for another set of characters the writers would have just inevitably forgotten existed until they needed them. And that's my review. What did you think of this episode? You likely either watched or skipped nearly 2 months ago. Share your thoughts down in the comments, and be sure to tune in tomorrow for even more Cartoon Hangout content. Thanks for watching. Take care. Hello, lords and ladies. Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. A Moon Knight Before Christmas wasn't exactly what I was expecting, and I mean that both positively and negatively. Positively in that it wasn't half bad and featured a fun but ultimately bizarre take on the Moon Knight character, and negatively because it showed me that for all Drake Bell's flaws as the voice of Spider-Man, there can always be worse voice acting than his. Let's tackle those one by one, starting with Moon Knight. Although I'm not as fluent in Moon Knight's history as others, I do know enough about the character that I thought it was almost fitting he be voiced by none other than Dietrich Bader, who also voiced Batman on The Brave and the Bold. I am a little sad we didn't get to see a more serious take on Spectre and Khonshu, as that's been an incredible dynamic within his comic book series, but I did at least find it to be pretty funny, as his craziness bounced off of Spidey's well.
You talking to the moon again?
Of course. Isn't that who you're talking to?
No. No one talks to the moon. The moon doesn't talk.
Well, if you are not talking to the moon, then who are you talking to?
No one.
Weirdo.
Anything that involved Moon Knight and Spider-Man was easily the best part of the episode. It's when the plot turns and focuses on Frances Beck and her father, the former Mysterio, that I got a little soured on the events. While I did enjoy the concept of Mysterio's daughter appearing to carry on his legacy, something explored often in superhero fiction, and I personally believe she was at least partially inspired by another Mysterio, Francis Clume, a lot of the drama and heart surrounding the story was deflated by a lackluster performance by Mary Wiles and Paul Scheer, the voices of Francis and Quentin Beck, respectively. Now, I'm not familiar with either of them, but just from a cursory glance at Wikipedia, both seem to be talented enough actors, or at least have been in some noteworthy things. But in this instance, I don't think they had much business portraying these two characters because they did really bad. And I mean that. Sure, I often take shots at Drake Bell's performance as Spidey, but it's 10 times better than these other two actors. I'm shocked the show even signed off on their takes as the final ones. Maybe they did even worse, though I can't imagine how. The thing with animation is it's not just a pure visual medium, it also needs talented voices breathing life into the characters. Without that, you get a lesser product. And in this case, it was hard to take anything seriously when every single line delivered by Mysterio and his daughter sounded terrible. Their awful deliveries ruined this moment here, which is meant to be heartfelt, but instead fell flat.
I can't go back. My soul is lost.
Dad, no! I love you too much to lose you again!
Luckily, the rest of the episode isn't as bad and managed to be relatively fun. I will say this though, having this episode be the first appearance of this show's version of Mysterio also helped to take some of the wind out of the plot as well. There's no real connection or relationship between Spidey and his foe when the episode treats it as if they've fought a number of times. It feels like another instance where a classic villain or just an element of the Spider-Man mythos is crammed into the season because the writers know the show is almost over, thus not allowing for any kind of build-up. That's my review. If you're a fan of Moon Knight, I'd highly recommend you give this a watch as it contains a pretty fun interpretation of the character, but you also wouldn't be missing out on too much if you just skip this one and eagerly waited for today's final 2 episodes, which will either send the series out with a bang or a whimper. I'm sure it'll be some awful mix of the two. For more Ultimate Spider-Man reviews, click here to the left, or you can watch my first look at the newest Resident Evil movie here on the right. Thanks for watching and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. For convenience, I will be reviewing episodes 25 and 26 as if they were one episode. I've made my disdain for the show known a number of times. While I went into the show back when it first aired with a lot of hype, I ended up being let down multiple times. And that's how I felt going into season 4. There was a lot of promise, but I didn't feel like the execution worked for me. If you recall in my previous review, I said the finale would either end with a bang, a whimper, or some sad mix of the two. Surprisingly, I have to say Graduation Day was a really nice send-off to the show. It wasn't the best finale I've ever seen, and it certainly could have been better in spots, but it wasn't bad. It's bordering on good, in fact. Some of those elements I felt weren't up to snuff was probably the lack of threat the superior Sinister Six represented. Yes, they brought Spidey to his knees, depowered him, and were a thorn in his side, but they not only were easily dispatched from the beginning, which I get was part of the plan, but they also got taken down as easily later in the finale. It was only Dr. Octopus who was any kind of threat. Now, I've never believed that Doc Ock was Peter's largest nemesis, but within this show, he certainly ended up being that, even if I don't completely buy that. In a way, this finale was about him as well. The story didn't really dig that deep into his character and motivations as much as I think it should have, but one could almost end up feeling sympathetic to Octavius by the end of this finale, and I think that was definitely a plus. Another thing going on for these 2 episodes was this exclusive focus on Spider-Man. It wasn't about Spidey and friends, or the Web Warriors. This was all about old Webhead, and this to me was a great way to end the series, even if it originally began as an animated Marvel team-up book, in a sense. It allowed us to see how Spider-Man had grown since the start of the series, even getting meta on us as his team remark how early on he seemed to learn the power of teamwork weekly. And while this is still my second to least favorite Spider-Man, only to Dan Slott's, I do like the show acknowledging his growth. And the big thing that stood out to me that maybe didn't work as well was Peter being down on himself in this episode when he mentions how he's failed. Given the adventures and the villains he's faced in all 4 seasons, you think being taken by surprise by Doc Ock wouldn't get him so down. I mean, I get he lost his powers, so I guess it kind of makes a little sense. But it just didn't completely jive with me as I was watching it. I think for such a painfully average and kind of mediocre Spider-Man cartoon, in my opinion, this finale ended up being the ultimate end to the series. It showed off Spidey's growth, it put him through one last big trial before he could graduate, and it did all of that amazingly well. I'm kind of shocked they didn't just flub the entire finale and end with a sad little whimper. It almost makes me wish there had been one more season to see if they could keep the momentum going, but knowing the show, I doubt it. Still, at least the show ended on a positive note, so that it wasn't all bad. So in the end, Ultimate Spider-Man finally wraps up. I'm weirdly almost sad to see it go, though I've never liked it as much as other Spider-Man media. Hopefully the team of writers who helm the next series learn a thing or two from the show, but based on the promotionals I've seen, they probably aren't. But what do you think of the finale? Let me know down in the comments below, and if you want to see some other reviews, here's some on the screen now. Thanks for watching, take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Okay, so I should either be in bed or working on much more pressing content, but here I am at 2 a.m. in the morning working on my thoughts on what Disney XD just released. Basically, this is what's going on. Disney just announced that they will be retelling Spider-Man's origins, but outside of the upcoming cartoon via some shorts that will be aired July 24th to the 28th. And they just uploaded part 1 online yesterday. I think that's a generally smart idea. People know Spider-Man's origins. Even if you shift the details here or there, we all get the basic idea. He's bitten by a spider, becomes Spider-Man, loses his uncle, and learns a lesson about power and responsibility. Yada yada yada. In comes the shorts to give us the skinny on this new version of Spider-Man's origins without wasting everyone's time in the actual official show. So, in this first short, we see that Pete's origin is once more tied to Osborn and that it takes place in his lab. It might be called Horizon Lab, which eagle-eyed Spider-Man fans may recognize from Slott's Amazing Spider-Man run, but is still owned by Norman. Peter is there on a field trip with Harry, who is his best friend, and in a weird departure seems to also be a science geek, and lacking his iconic red hair from the comics. Is black now. It's a small, insignificant change, and I guess it's fine. Other fans may know that Smythe and his son are present during the field trip. This is possibly just a cameo, but later down the line we could see Smythe go down the same villainous route he did in the comics by designing his Spider Slayers, which he infamously used thanks to some help from J. Jonah Jameson to hunt down Spider-Man. He seems to be occupying the same role here that Octavius did in the Ultimate Spider-Man comics. Liz Allen's also here, sporting a cute, slight redesign as opposed to her blonde locks in the comics. I don't recognize her voice actress here, but I do like her. Things eventually take the turn you imagine, with Peter being bit by a spider, getting sick, and learning he's got super abilities when he smashes down a locked bathroom door. For a short only 4 minutes long, I was pretty entertained. It'll take some time getting used to this new Peter's voice actor, and the weird lack of shadows to any of the characters, or the absence of any shading on the characters, but maybe this show won't be such a train wreck after all. It'll be interesting to see where this show's influences come from. Will it be the main series, the Ultimate Marvel Universe, or a mix of several? I'm excited to see part 2 of the origin and get some more details before the official premiere. What about you though? Any thoughts you'd like to share about the short? If so, use the comment section below. And also consider checking out my merch store and Patreon if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Alright, I'm a few shorts behind, but let's attempt to plow right through them today. In the previous short we witnessed Peter getting bit and getting spider powers. This one, titled Observation, shows off his new powers as he works through them via the scientific method. I admit, I kinda like the science know-how Pete demonstrates here. He is one of the smartest characters in the Marvel Universe, but for some reason it came off less like a nerd thinking things through and more like a complete know-it-all. Which, newsflash, hasn't ever really been Spidey's thing. Not completely. And based on another review I read of the first 2 episodes of the series, apparently him sounding like a know-it-all is a real problem. Hopefully that is just within the first 2 episodes and this short, and the rest of this cartoon won't really make Pete super annoying. Other than that, the rest of the short is pretty good. Pete's new voice actor is still taking some getting used to. The animation complaints I mentioned before are obviously still here, because why wouldn't they be? But it's a fun, if even shorter, short than the last one. I'm kind of looking forward to whatever the third short will be. Anyways, those are my brief thoughts on the second Spider-Man short. What are yours? Please refrain from talking about later shorts and restrict your opinions to this one. Thanks. The next review will probably already be up along with this one, so click through to that one. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. The third short, Hypothesis, is probably one of the best shorts at this moment being where I currently am and watching them. It also makes it apparent that each short is being named for the scientific method. I did not realize that until now. I am dumb. I think this one is the best short so far because Peter exploring his powers even more is a lot of fun. There's a few comedic moments that really felt genuine, even if they weren't gut-bursting or anything. Peter is a fairly funny guy, even if some characters find him incredibly annoying. To us, the viewer, he should come off as humorous. We shouldn't find him necessarily grating. I think that's a mistake Ultimate Spider-Man made, personally. If this is what the main series itself will look like, I do hope it remains consistent. Again, Spider-Man is funny, but he isn't Deadpool. His series isn't a comedy. There's serious, mature stories being told, yet he'll find some time to quip due to his fear. That's Spider-Man. But, yeah, Hypothesis is a lot of fun. We're getting pretty close to him becoming Spider-Man, and I'm looking forward to the next short. Why not leave your thoughts to this short down below, and I'll see you soon for Part 4's review. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. I'm definitely getting more used to this show by now and the character's voice with Short 4, Prediction. Obviously shorts are, by their nature, pretty short, but not too much happens in this one besides Peter figuring out that his next step should be fame and fortune as a wrestler, something we've seen in several different iterations of the character. There's a cool scene where he's trying on potential wrestling costumes, and normally this part is never that interesting beyond some comedy. And that's still there, when he tries on underwear and a cape. The real gem is where he actually, I'm not kidding, tries on a Scarlet Spider costume. That was pretty awesome for an Easter egg. I just hope one day Ben Reilly can make his true debut in a Marvel cartoon, and not who he got in Ultimate Spider-Man. I'm still miffed they merged Ben and Kane into one character. Would have been cool if Pete used this costume, but then abandoned it for the classic one later, then have Ben see it and take it in a later season or something. Probably won't happen, though. So yeah, another short review. My hype for the show is building back up a little more, but we'll see how much that changes when I get to episode 1. What about you? You like this short or not? Let me know down below. That's what those comment sections are for, after all. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. I was just about to go and do something else with my time after finishing my review for short number 4 when Disney uploaded the 5th one. So, guess what? Here's another review, lightning quick. Let's talk about what I did like. Obviously the fight with Bonesaw. It's Spider-Man at his best, dodging attacks and quipping. It's not an especially flashy battle because Bonesaw is just human, but it makes for some good entertainment. And of course Stan Lee makes a special appearance as he's known to do. That was pretty funny too. The final thing of note I liked was the media aspect of the wrestling match. I don't ever recall him interacting or being interviewed in previous Spider-Man media, but if not, I wonder why they never toyed with it. Either way, really neat addition. Now on to stuff I didn't like. The return of Peter randomly talking science. He's a science nerd. We get it. It comes off far too annoying for my taste, and really brings home with another review, I think from IGN, said about Peter's characteristic in this new show, making him seem a little unlikable. From these shorts, I can really see that. Other than that, I think this 5th short was good. We've already gotten a look at the thief who will go on to kill Peter's Uncle Ben, so the next short will hopefully give us some emotional impact there. Or it could be completely flat with this newer voice actor. We shall see. Anyway, go ahead and give me your thoughts on this short down below. Would love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. This is the last short before the premiere of Marvel Spider-Man on August 19th, and it is some powerful stuff. If you recall what I said in my previous video, I was concerned that the death of Uncle Ben could potentially fall flat since its voice actor is relatively new. I was so wrong. At first, I wasn't sure I was, and the first few lines of dialogue in this short were more of Peter randomly talking about science, specifically the makeup of his wrestling trophy. Peter's always been a science nerd, and it's generally been handled well in the various cartoons. The approach in this latest iteration has left me feeling lukewarm. If I had the time, I'd go back and compare how each cartoon portrayed Peter's love of science. For now, let's say it could get really annoying the way the writers are going about it right now. It seems less passion and more prideful, if you know what I mean. But after those lines, that's when things get intense. For a newcomer to the world of voice acting, as far as I can tell from Wikipedia, this Robbie fellow pours a ton of emotion into his lines. You can feel the sadness and anger the character feels over Uncle Ben's death, as it should be of course. Wow, and the scene where he goes after the killer? Really, really powerful. I'm not much of a crier anymore, but it definitely tugs at the heartstrings, especially this line.
Save your excuses! All I want to hear is your screams!
I'll get some heat for this, but he put more emotion into this one short than Drake Bell did in the entire run of Ultimate Spider-Man. And if this is the delivery we can expect from the rest of the series, he's got my approval. After watching these 6 shorts, I can say without any doubt this is my favorite. It balances everything that makes Spidey who he is. Because like I said before, he's not just a jokester or Deadpool light, some meme machine. There's a lot of guilt built into his character and how he chooses to move forward and honor his uncle. If this new show can actually juggle every aspect of Spider-Man and do it better than Ultimate Spider-Man did, do it on par with Spectacular Spider-Man, then I'm on board all the way. But what about you? What did you think of the shorts? General thoughts and feelings about them? Share down below. For more cartoon reviews like this, subscribe to the channel. And for mostly early access to these videos, check out my Patreon. I've also got a merch store worth checking out. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Marvel's new Spider-Man cartoon, simply titled Marvel's Spider-Man, is finally here. After getting a sneak peek and 6 shorts last month, how does the actual show stack up? I'm here to give my own answer to that. First off, many of my complaints or things that rub me the wrong way are still present. Obviously, because there'd be no way to necessarily correct them that fast. I still have a love-hate relationship with the increased focus on Peter's science know-how. It's cool that the writers have him solving more complex problems with his brain, something that wasn't always on full display in previous iterations, but at times it grates on the nerves. It serves less to show off how smart Peter is and accidentally makes him out to be insufferable. Nothing proves this more than when Peter doesn't yell brain freeze and instead some overly complicated scientific term for it. Moments like these serve to detract from the overall quality of the show, which isn't a good thing considering there's already some elements to the show that are rubbing fans the wrong way. The animation and art style for one. I've already said my piece on this in previous videos, but I can't let this review go by without letting you know that I'm not a big fan of it. It can come off a little cheap and less detailed than even the Spider-Man cartoons from a decade ago. When a cartoon from the 90s, which wasn't all that great in terms of animation, somehow one-ups a show from 2017, you know you've screwed up. It doesn't help that the backgrounds are very uninspired. At times they're flat, and when the CGI pops up, it looks even cheaper. I was wondering why the show premiered so quickly after Ultimate Spider-Man. Maybe they quickly threw together a replacement to capitalize on the movie. That's my guess anyway. But what about the story? It's okay to be honest. Peter's school is hosting Max Modell, who you may recall was Pete's boss in the comics, and things go awry after Smythe sabotages a few of the Horizon High students' experiments. This is probably one of the few more positive examples of Peter using his smarts in a way that doesn't end up being annoying, as he solves one of Modell's equations and uses it to calm a raging fire. Miles and Anya get their own cameos in the scene, and I am more than a little mixed on it. The characters aren't who I would typically associate with being geniuses like Peter. It's a minor change to be sure, but in the comics, Anya was more of a gymnast, not a scientist. It seems like a lazy way of getting both characters closer to Peter, and there's ways of introducing them as spiders without doing that. I'll leave room for my mind to be changed as we see more of these two characters in later episodes, though. Vulture is the first supervillain Peter faces in the show, which I appreciate, as this is true in the comics as well. I'm a fan of his redesign here, and that the show didn't go for the easier route by making him look like the Homecoming Vulture. I just couldn't really get behind his over-the-top voice, though. It was obviously being kinda, gargled by some tech, but it just sounded weird, and not in the good way. The character in the comics and media usually get introduced as wanting revenge on someone who has wronged him. This time it's Max for firing him. I don't want to compare this show heavily to Spectacular Spider-Man all the time, but that show did a little bit better at showing us the Vulture and why he was pissed than this one. Of course, this is just part 1, and I've yet to see part 2, so maybe we'll see something there. Otherwise, I think the very first episode of Marvel Spider-Man was simply okay. It didn't do much to soothe my worries about the quality of the series, and the general look and feel of the show still seems very cheap. It delivers a serviceable first supervillain fight and plot, sets up the pieces for more conflict with the Smythes, as well as maybe prematurely introduce us to Miles and Anya Corazon. Despite these flaws, much of the rest of the episode is decent enough. I don't know if this new series will do anything to win back the Spidey fans who felt let down by Ultimate Spider-Man, or who want a spiritual successor to Spectacular, and it might not be enough to entice new viewers in with its odd design choices and the extreme focus on science jargon. I'll stick with the series weekly to let you know how it improves or gets worse though. So make sure to subscribe for more content, click that bell icon to be notified of new videos, and tune in tomorrow for my part 2 review. Also, scroll on down and leave your own comments on this video. While you're there, be sure to check out my Patreon and merch store. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Sorry it took me so long to get around to this review, just the typical archaic luck I guess. So, the second episode of Marvel Spider-Man I happened to like a little bit better than the first. It just had more of what I was looking for in a Spider-Man cartoon, and it balanced Peter's intellect better than the first episode did. There's still elements I'm a little iffy on, like Scorpion's razor-sharp teeth, Anya as a scientist, or the newly introduced Teen Dr. Octopus? Boy, if you hated Emo Vulture and Ultimate Spider-Man, you might not like this. I'm more torn on the Teen Octopus, really. I'm not a fan of them making almost every supporting cast from the comics the same age or a similar age as Peter, but there's also a chance for a really cool dynamic between a young Peter and a young Octavius. Octavius was always what would have happened to Peter if his home life had been more negative, and now we get to see them at the same age. Maybe they'll form a rivalry, a friendship. If they could do what Smallville did for Superman and Lex Luthor, I'd be all for it. I won't hold out hope, though, as Marvel consistently lets me down these days. Now, if there's one thing the renewed focus on Pete's intelligence has done favorably, is give him access to more interesting story opportunities and tech, which normally wouldn't happen until later in his life when he actually does join Horizon Labs. But I doubt this series will last long enough for us to get to that point. This episode sort of has that, where Pete stays late and interrupts a Slayer from making off with some of Osborn's tech. It's a cool little battle, and it puts Peter and Harry on a bad road, if you know exactly what those bombs really were. Anya plays a tiny role in this episode in helping Peter, and I'm kinda okay with it. I don't like the idea of Peter constantly not being able to do anything without the help of a third party. I know the show's theme is teamwork, and that's great, but Spider-Man isn't much of a hero if in every conflict he himself is incapable of saving the day without assistance. This is what's wrong with Dan Slott's Spider-Man run, and I'm worried that this is his influence at work here. If every so often he needs some help, fine. If every battle he needs someone else to help him do his job, no, I'm just not on board for that. Despite all of that, the episode was pretty engaging to watch. It may look like someone forgot to shade in the characters, probably an intern, but at least this version of Peter is closer to a version that we deserve. But what did you think of this episode? Do you have any favorite moments? If so, let me know down below. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello, lords and ladies. Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon.
Thanks. I don't mean to judge, but you know you could have just created a web fan and made a wind cushion from the helicopter's air pressure, right?
Honestly, I feel like this scene here is the root of some of my problems with the show. It's just kind of a dumb line. It's only 3 minutes into the episode, and I mentally rolled my eyes and wanted to quit watching right here. I'm not saying Gwen can't be smart, but exactly how does constantly showing up Peter with various other smart characters make for an interesting cartoon? Again, I'm totally fine with a smart Gwen. We got one in Spectacular Spider-Man, and she was pretty great. But she didn't one-up Peter or Spider-Man, advising him on how he does his job as Spider-Man. You know who corrects their rescuers? Jerks. Gwen's not even the only character to do so, otherwise it'd just be a nitpick at this point. The intense focus on science is cool, and I appreciate it for the new story possibilities it'll bring with Peter. But does everyone need to be as smart as Peter and spout science left and right? It's kind of annoying. 1 or 2 smart characters is fine, but Peter should really be the main focus in my opinion. He can't even take out villains by himself, as this marks the 3rd outing that others have needed to give him advice on how to do things that he should rightfully figure out himself. Now, I'm not arguing for a nigh omnipotent Batman-like Spider-Man here. I'm asking for Peter to work things out as a smart, intelligent young man. In the comics, Peter could figure out this all on his own, most of the time, only needing help with certain villains. What I mean is, he'd get his ass handed to him at first, then figure out what he'd need to do to take someone down. The best example of this is actually in this episode. To help him deal with Shocker's weapon, he webs himself up to lessen the shock. That's the Spider-Man fans love. But the show seems to want to give Peter help in the form of civilian assists, and I think that doesn't work well. He's not learning how to stop villains by himself in this show. He has to have others give him tips, because now everyone is a genius and knows how to use his powers better than he does. It's far too much like Dan Slott's Spider-Man, which has been criticized by fans for making the character seem like an idiot who can't do anything without someone else there besides him. Which is silly given how long he has operated as a solo hero. At least Gwen's general appearance is appealing, though if you look at her outfit you can see it subtly, or not so subtly, hinting at her future as Spider-Gwen, and I kinda hate that. Well, I in general don't like the idea of her becoming Spider-Woman in this show. Couldn't we have normal Gwen and alternate Gwen just show up from time to time? The reason I feel this way is because I just don't like Gwen as Spider-Woman. The comic, it's lackluster, and the only time it was slightly fun was in Ultimate Spider-Man, and I've already said my piece on that show. Maybe this show will do better, but I just prefer we stuck with Gwen for now. And hopefully the writers take a page from Spectacular on how to write a smart Gwen, because this episode does not inspire confidence. Let's move on though. The actual conflict of this episode is not much better than what I was just harping on. First off, we get the Jackal. Awesome, the Jackal's cool. I love his design and his voice. I don't love how he's just randomly a supervillain operating prior to meeting Spider-Man. He's not a career criminal, he's a scientist who falls in love with Gwen and then clones her. Now he's written as wanting revenge on Osborn, related to Gwen, and transforms into the Jackal a la Dr. Jekyll. At least this episode actually hints at some backstory or setup to Jackal, but so far the villains just show up and there's no story behind that. Now, some of you have taken this to mean I want a typical villain of the week plot, but I have no idea how anyone reached that conclusion. My point in saying this was that the villains basically just clash with Spider-Man with no real insight into their characters. The only one we really got to know about was Vulture, and that's barely. What was Scorpion up to? What is Jackal doing? No idea, because apparently they only serve to stir up drama in Peter's life. That's all fine and whatnot, but the villains play a major role in any Spider-Man story. They shouldn't just be there as fluff. That's not me wanting villain of the week, that's me wanting the villains to be developed beyond a weak plot device. Speaking of plot devices, even Shocker and Clash show up, but are now teenagers? I don't even know what to say to that. It's not even them being teens that's the problem here. If they were written better, I could have gotten on board. But them turning on each other was so terribly written, it's a joke. It took one little thing, one little spark, and they went at each other. It made no sense. For two close friends, they sure were quick to attack each other, and almost destroy Osborn Academy along with innocent bystanders. It doesn't make sense because we're just introduced to them. We get no insight into the characters beyond how close friends they are. If you're gonna have them turn on each other, sow some seeds of jealousy or distrust before you do so. That's all I mean. Harry's hate for Spider-Man really doesn't gel either. It could have, but it's based on something so non-existent, it's stupid. If you want Harry to distrust Spider-Man, give him something beyond, oh, he showed up at that one thing, and maybe he had something to do with me being expelled. He doesn't grow to distrust Spidey because he was pulling a bomb out of his bag. No, the distrust got sown before that even. And that's why I think it's weak. Give Harry a real reason. You know why movie Harry hated Spider-Man? Because he found him standing over his dead father. Now there's a real reason. And before someone starts being obtuse in the comments, no, I am not saying kill Norman. I'm trying so hard, guys. You have no idea. It may seem like I'm just hating to hate. After Ultimate Spider-Man, I want to love the show. I just want to have a fun, exciting, well-written, and animated Spider-Man cartoon. I am doing my absolute best to give it a fair shot, but every turn I keep being blindsided with mediocre storytelling and odd choices. The show's decisions just make me cringe so badly. Now, what was even good about this episode? I don't know. The Jackal, maybe? Whatever story might come from Gwen's uncle being a bad guy? But even that's attached to things I really dislike, so who knows? Like, why is he now Raymond Warren? You know who that is? That's Miles Warren's brother from the comics. In the comics, Jackal is Miles. Why did they change it? If you're gonna change it, at least have a reason. Maybe the change happened because making the dude who wanted to bang Gwen and her clones her uncle would kinda be creepy. Also, I don't know if it's just me, but the decision to have Gwen's uncle be a villain seems pretty close to the plotline of the new Spider-Man movie. If this is going to be what I have to expect from the series, I'm going to start dreading watching it. Okay, I'm done for now. Just tell me what you thought. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. I'm not really in the mood to craft full reviews on anything today. If you aren't following me on Twitter, I woke up to a bunch of my videos demonetized. Some made sense, like videos about Dead or Alive or Senran Kagura because boobs. But then I got one for Scooby Apocalypse and Slugterra? Why in the heck is Slugterra unsuitable for advertisers? I don't know, and I can't refute it because it needs 1,000 views within the last 7 days. So I guess screw me, right? Now I'm just worried about all my reviews getting hit. I already make crap from YouTube and my Patreon is a ghost town, so unlike some big YouTubers, I'm really just screwed here if all my content gets hit. But that is enough of my sob story. Like I said, I'm not in the mood to write long, in-depth reviews, as well as I'm getting sick too, if that sentence made any sense. Sorry, I can't think straight right now. So anyways, yes, enjoy my insanely quick thoughts on Marvel Spider-Man and Mysticons. I thought A Day in the Life was a solid episode. Its use of Peter constantly switching from experimenting with his new tech, chasing down Black Cat, and then interacting with his peers is a really great representation of who Spider-Man is and the hectic life he lives, and is even a plotline that feels ripped from the very comic book pages themselves. Black Cat was the choice of villain in this one, and was a step up in terms of the last few episodes. She was a lot of fun to see, and who knew I'd want a short-haired cat. And we're getting more breadcrumbs that there is a mastermind behind these foes, so maybe they're adapting the Master Planner, or someone like him. If you know who he was in the comics, that does leave us with some choice suspects. And then there's V252, which is obviously the Venom symbiote. Fun fact, the name of it is a reference to issue 252, where Peter first comes home from Secret Wars with the symbiote. Very cool. Anyways, good episode. Along with episode 5, these are my favorite episodes of the show so far. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. So with episode 5, Party Animals, I don't have as many complaints as I did with previous episodes. In fact, most of them are more minor than anything substantial, but let's get into them. Right off the bat, I'm not a fan of Rhino's design in this show. From the head down, it looks good, but that weird patch of hair on the top, coupled with his eyes, looks really off for some reason. I know Rhino is probably among the tougher of Spidey's rogue gallery to redesign, given he's, just a simple rhino, but I still feel they could have done better. Maybe just stick with his classic design? I don't know, it's not that big a deal really. There's also the continuation of Peter's villains being teenagers. I'm a little surprised they went this route with Rhino since they did a similar concept in Ultimate Spider-Man. He was a good guy and a teenager in that one too. Despite that, Alexei is a fairly fun character. I'm hoping we see more from him, though I would like to get a villainous Rhino at some point. Also, there was a few moments in the animation of this episode that seemed weak, but nothing beyond what I've already said about it in earlier reviews. And as for things I did like, the science is a little less obnoxious in this episode. I actually didn't groan when Peter takes a second to figure out how to line up the trajectory of a spider slayer to avoid it blowing up around civilians. Although I think the only difference between this version of Spider-Man and others is that the show is specifically showing us that he's doing calculations, rather than in past iterations. Then there's the entire group of scientists at the dance working to find a cure for Rhino. I thought that scene was pretty nicely done. Just to nitpick though, I don't know why they decided Miles would spew some Rhino facts at us. Nervousness maybe? I don't know, I just found it a bit strange is all. And the drama around the reveal of Jackal as Gwen's uncle felt a little undeserved in my opinion. Just with how suddenly he was introduced 2 episodes ago, and now we're expected to feel attached when Gwen breaks down. It's probably my biggest complaint with this episode, as I would have liked to see it spread out a little bit more. But I think beyond that, the scene with Peter and Gwen bonding was great, so something good came from something I didn't necessarily approve of. Otherwise, I think it was a decent episode. It's not perfect, obviously, I had some small complaints here or there, but nothing that utterly ruined the episode for me. There was even an actual joke that made me laugh.
Hey, sorry I'm late. This stupid tie set me back half an hour.
The tying of bow ties is a dying art, Pete. That's why you have to embrace the modern age.
You didn't design a bow tying machine, did you? Nope, I bought a clip-on.
Anyway, I haven't slept at all, so I'm signing off. And that's your explanation for why I haven't actually reviewed episode 4. That one will be coming later this week because I watched a few minutes of it. I really do like it, but it stars Black Cat, one of my favorite Spider-Man villains, so I want to, you know, give it the attention it deserves, and I'm running on 0 fumes right now. But that is your cue to leave your own thoughts on Party Animals down below. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello, lords and ladies. Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Now, this is what I'm talking about. Episode 6, Sandman, is a great episode. It's pretty entertaining from start to finish, and its villain, Sandman, actually does get some backstory in the episode, unlike the first few villains Spidey has faced up until now. And that adds so much to the episode that I feel like it helps my case regarding getting to know the show's villains a little more. With the Sandman story and the heartbreak over his daughter Kemia, we get a lot more emotional connection to the events unfolding. I actually care what happens to Flint and his daughter because I know something about him and his daughter. He's not just a foe from Spidey's gallery that pops up and is gone again. Let's just hope that in future episodes, they continue this trend, even if they toy with how they go about using it. Then there's Kemia, or Sandgirl, I guess we'll be calling her, who was voiced by Sophia Carson. She's a little annoying, but a decent enough antagonist in the episode. My one complaint would be that an episode like this feels almost like a second season episode, one where we already know Sandman and then we learn about his daughter and her powers. But despite that, the story that's told about her and her father is an impactful one, and since she gets away, I'm sure we'll see more of her. No wait, my other complaint is some of her lines, especially when she talks about literally following in her father's footsteps into the factory.
But when I got creeped out sitting alone in the dark, I did the one thing I said I'd never do. I followed in my father's footsteps.
That metaphor isn't terrible, but maybe show don't tell. Having the character actually voice that was just kind of cringy, and they probably could have done some other takes or rewritten some lines concerning her talking about being smart. That again felt like a show don't tell moment, or something Flint could have talked about. Probably one of the coolest moments is Peter getting the Venom symbiote costume in a really serious moment. They could have done a better job with the voice effect, but otherwise watching him subtly act different and just beast his way through the baddies was really cool. Almost made me forget that the animation in the show still needs some work, though I will admit this was likely the show's best attempt. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who noticed his black jacket when he got back home. While wearing red, blue all the time is a little too Power Rangers for me, I'm okay with this subtle wardrobe change to reflect an attitude change in him, thanks to the symbiote. Can't do worse than Spider-Man 3. The episode features some classic examples of Peter solving stuff mostly on his own, and even some of the consequences he didn't take into account. I think that's perfectly fine for a young Peter. Though some weaker moments were still his posse getting into the line of danger to help him. It's a personal thing, but I'd rather their assistants stayed mostly at school rather than in the field. But, barring that, I'd still give this episode a good grade. It's got mostly what I'm looking for from a Spider-Man cartoon, enough that I can kinda get past the stuff I don't like, as long as it doesn't overwhelm the future episodes like the earlier ones. What did you think of Sandman? Did you like the show's take on him? And what about Kemia, his daughter? Share your thoughts down below. And be sure to check out my Patreon or Spreadshirt accounts if you'd like to support the channel. The $5 tier on Patreon will get you access to my videos earlier than when they go up on YouTube. Check it out if you're able. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. I went into episode 7, Symbiotic Relationship, a little concerned. Despite high praise for episode 6 and the appearance of the symbiote costume, I felt the show was rushing into the story a little too quickly for my taste. Peter's only been a superhero for a short time, and it didn't make sense to me to have him experience the suit just yet. However, I can't deny that this episode was rather great, with the exception of the writers attempting to one-up the cringe factor of Emo Peter in Spider-Man 3. This episode is spectacular. Peter, in his less cringy moments, is exceptional as Dark Spider-Man, as one cop dubbed him. The shift in personality is subtle at first and crescendos into outright douchebaggery by the time Pete realizes the suit is affecting him. The writing doesn't always do a good job of this, with outright bizarre dialogue lines such as this.
Just a little confidence, brah.
Largely, though, it's a strength of the episode to see Spider-Man become harsher and more violent, as he has historically in past iterations when under the influence of the symbiote. It might not be as iconic as earlier shows or the comics themselves, but a definite highlight of episode 7 is the struggle between the symbiote and Spider-Man as he tries to regain control as he swings through New York City, though the alien at times comes off goofy rather than malicious. Norman's role in this episode also helps make this entertaining. He downright steals the scene from time to time, so great is his on-screen presence. It's hard to compare him to the previous depictions, but this is pretty on par with Spectacular Spider-Man's Osborn, or even the first Spider-Man movie. I'm looking forward to more episodes with him. I'm happy to say that even with my concerns about the show, it can still deliver a third highly entertaining episode in a row. But what about you? Do you have any thoughts on episode 7? Share them down below. Be sure to check out my Patreon account or Spreadshirt store if you'd like to support the channel. The $5 tier nets you early access to all kinds of videos. I'd appreciate if you took the time to give them a glance. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Today I'm going to be talking about episode 8, Stark Expo. If this show keeps up the current pace of quality, I'm going to be less worried another stinker like episode 3 is going to happen. Seriously, I think this will have to take the place of my new favorite episode. It has great action, humor, and continues the trend of the show's theme of teamwork being really well choreographed. Spider-Man gets the limelight, but gets well-written additional help from various Expo attendees, and not in a way that overshadows him or lessens his role, which is the way it should be. The episode also seems to operate as the third and possibly final part of this initial symbiote arc, if you can call it that. The alien does play a helpful role in the episode, considering the enemy is Ghost and he controls technology. I really love the choice of villain for this episode. Ghost has always been a really underused but pretty cool character. The only weird thing is he looks less like Ghost from the comics and more like Taskmaster. I can't be the only one who sees the similarities. Though to be fair, he does look a little like his original design from his first appearance, so I guess it's fine. And something that I failed to mention in my last couple of reviews, but I have been noticing the animation during action scenes has improved a little. Things feel more fluid and have more weight to them. Maybe the team has finally hit their groove, or they fired some people, who knows. Basically, it's just a really good, entertaining episode. It also seeds a couple of developments for the future, like Venom reacting to Flash, or Otto being tempted to Osborn Academy, although they also could just be cute Easter eggs for fans. Either way, I can't wait to see what else the show has for us. And that's it for this review. Sorry it's a little bit short, but I didn't really have that much to say. Why don't you chime in down below with your thoughts on the episode, and I will see you later for more Marvel Spider-Man reviews. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. And this is Rapid Fire Reviews, where because I'm a lazy procrastinator trying to quickly catch up on videos, I give my thoughts on multiple episodes as quickly as I can. Today I'll be talking about Marvel Spider-Man episodes 9 through 13. Let's start with Spider-Man episode 9, Ultimate Spider-Man. I'm going to get this out of the way now, but I feel this is way too soon to be introducing a second Spider-Man. We're only a few episodes into the first season, and surely not long into Spidey's hero career. It doesn't make narrative sense, even when you account for this being a different universe and a different interpretation. It'd be like Batman adopting a Robin within days of being Batman, or more closely, introducing a second Batman within days of Bruce becoming Batman. There's a certain flow to these type of things, and this show threw it out the window. Barring that, the episode actually wasn't all bad. While they've introduced the Ultimate Spider-Man too soon, the episode managed to tell a compelling tale about power and responsibility, with Spider-Man mentoring Miles on the go as they face off against two massive Spider Slayers. And the parts about the Spider Army and what has to be the first hint of clones seems really exciting. I can't wait to see where that plot goes in future episodes. Hopefully they don't rush into it, which is the series' biggest flaw. Taking into account the rushed introduction of Miles as Spider-Man, I would say that episode 9 was decent enough. Up next is episode 10. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but in episode 10, Kraven's Amazing Hunt, it is shown Spider-Man has been a superhero for only 3 months, and yet the writers thought it was a smart idea to introduce Miles as Ultimate Spider-Man. It's even less time than I originally thought. It's a dumb idea, dumbly executed. Beyond that, the episode was fairly decent, with shockingly believable and funny dialogue written for Peter and Miles, though personally I don't think quips should be shared by the spiders. That should be Peter's thing, but whatever. This episode also introduces Kraven. Cool new design, but my biggest gripe is this. Why does he have a metal arm? Why does it look like X-Men Cable's? He even sports a cable-looking scar over his eye and a big freaking gun. Also, partway through the show, the animators gave up on giving Kraven pointy teeth and settled on normal-looking ones. If it happened in one frame, I'd look past it, but for the rest of the episode, they were missing. What a goof. Next, we have episode 11, Halloween Moon. Hulk and Man-Wolf both together in one episode make a lot of sense. Though again, we're left with a teen Jameson, who apparently turned himself into the wolf on purpose, and there's no mention of him being JJ's son, as far as I can recall. I'm not a big fan of those changes. Man-Wolf has usually been very reluctant, and this casts him in a slightly more negative light. Being that this is a Halloween episode, I do have a little bit of a bias towards it, but other than Man-Wolf and being set on the holiday, not much else is done with it. The banter between Peter and Bruce is great, highlighting the similarities between the two heroes, the problem that comes with dual identities. I'd love to get even more of this with other Marvel heroes. Perhaps you'll learn different lessons from other heroes. There's not a lot wrong with this episode other than it continuing to show that the lack of shadows and certain subpar animation are an awful combination. It's pretty well paced for a Spider-Man episode, and the stakes and action all ramp up in satisfying ways, eventually leading to something out of a kid's fantasy. Hulk Wolf. Super cool. I do wonder if this show's continuity is completely removed from the other Marvel shows, though. Maybe we'll never know. Episode 12 is up next. Spider-Man on Ice is a pretty cool episode, pardon the pun. It sees the introduction of Blizzard, a villain who has typically been associated with Iron Man, not Spider-Man. Unfortunately, his redesign left me feeling cold. See, this is Blizzard. While I'm open to certain reinterpretations, it helps if they're interesting. His design in the comics may not be as chill as other characters going by Blizzard in the comics, is at least better than Frosty Tips over here. I wasn't even that impressed when he encased himself in a giant ice mech. Luckily, the conflict and interactions between Peter, Spidey, and Harry was convincing enough to carry the episode when its villain could not. Heck, there was even a really genuinely funny scene involving Change and Spidey on Ice. Oh, and eagle-eyed fans may have caught more than a glimpse of a certain Hobgoblin's flaming sword. The show loves these little Easter eggs, but will they amount to anything, or will they just fizzle out like many of Dan Slott's Spider-Man stories? All in all, it's another quality episode. And finally, we reach the end of this video with episode 13, Venom. I was gonna start off this review with me being disappointed Marvel chose Flash to be Venom for the second time in a row, but it actually wasn't like that. Well, sort of like that, but by episode's end it was off him. So maybe Eddie will show up eventually and get to be Venom. But anyway, I really liked this episode. It had a fairly decent mystery as to who Venom was, a lot of good comedy, mostly centered around Flash and Parker, as well as a great team-up by them later on. Seriously, it was an awesome episode, surprisingly. Probably in my top 5 episodes of the moment, whatever the other 4 are. Oh, and Mary Jane showed up, but dressed as a tiger and with no lines. See, she was a mascot. The tiger mascot. Get it? Tiger? Sort of like a reference to her first spoken lines to Peter in the comics. And her partial appearance in this episode, but not yet full one, could also be seen as a bit of a reference, as she only appeared in shadows before she ever got to meet Peter within the comic books. Pretty cool. So there we have it, my thoughts on these 5 episodes. While I have some problems with the way the show is structured, largely it seems to be shaping up to be even better than Ultimate Spider-Man was. I'm actually looking forward to what's coming up next. Why don't you share your thoughts on these episodes down below, what your favorite or least favorite moments were. Oh, and if you have a moment to spare, check out my Patreon to see the perks that come with helping to support the channel, or my merch store if you'd like some Archaic King t-shirts. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. The new Spider-Man episode, Screwball Live, introduces audiences to a little-known, somewhat more recent, relatively speaking, character from Spidey's comics, Screwball. Much like her comic book counterpart, she films herself and uploads it to the internet. However, in the cartoon, she's not a villain, and is revealed very quickly to be Liz Allen, of all people. I wasn't sure at first how to feel about that. On the one hand, it does give Liz some part to play in the show, but it also felt like yet another character being shoehorned into a role they've never really occupied just to fit the show's themes. Unless she has more screen time in the future, I'm not too sure why they didn't just introduce the actual Screwball, though I guess it helps the comic still hasn't revealed her identity yet. There's also the fact that Screwball is annoying, even in the comics, making her a difficult character to make work, in my personal opinion. Luckily, by episode's end, the character does get some redemption and sees some growth. I really like that, and it has me hoping to see more of Liz in the future. The rest of the episode sees Spidey taking on not only the Absorbing Man, but Hammerhead. It feels like the show is definitely positioning Hammerhead as a quick, reoccurring villain for Spider-Man to face. I'm not completely against it, but his role has quickly become fairly comedic. Not too sure how I like that. Absorbing Man is played pretty accurately. Without the Screwball element, though, I think the episode would have just been average at best. An element that rang a little false to me, but maybe I'm reading too much into it, is the somewhat negative outlook on the internet. Gwen comments about how the internet is a powerful tool, but we use it for prank videos. Well, that's not completely incorrect. It seems that whenever the internet or technology comes up in the media, older writers tend to portray it as a negative thing instead of a positive thing, or at best, both. Even Stephen King wrote a novel where cell phones caused the apocalypse. I wouldn't mind seeing a show, book, or whatever tell a more positive story about technology, but maybe that's just me. Speaking of Gwen, she plays a small but important role as the person helping Peter crack a thumb drive. It doesn't overshadow our main character in any way, and actually made me warm up to her a little bit more. I just really like the scene between the two of them. I'm hoping for more scenes like this. At the end of the day, episode 14 is a competent episode. It's entertaining, funny at generally the right moments, and yeah, that's all I really have to say on it. What are your thoughts on Screwball Live? Did you like the changes they made to Liz Allen and Screwball? Share those thoughts down below, and tune in again tomorrow for more Cartoon Hangout. Oh, and while you're still here, check out my Patreon. You can get early access to videos, get your name called out in videos, and have a more direct impact on what shows, games, or books I cover. Check it out if you're interested in supporting what I do here on the channel. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Before beginning this review, I just want to recommend you go and check out my Cartoon Hangout Award Show video. In it, I talk about a few shows I think were the best new cartoons of 2017. I think you'll like it. Link in the description. Okay, now to the review. After a hiatus lasting months, seriously, what the hell, we finally have some more Spider-Man episodes to look forward to. Now, despite me putting this show in my award show video, I still wasn't entirely sold on this upcoming story arc. A young Otto is pretty strange, and even after this episode, I'm not sure it necessarily adds anything new, since he still operates as Peter's teacher. That dynamic would still surely exist had he been designed to be older. With that said, I did enjoy the first part of The Rise of Doc Ock. It's a rather well-written first part, and I'm looking forward to seeing where the story goes. Unlike some previous episodes, this arc is actually going to build Ock up, so that he eventually becomes the supervillain we all know and love. Though I'm not entirely sure at this point what will tip him over. In the original canon, just the explosion alone seemed to send him over to the dark side. I guess the difference here is that Peter managed to talk to him and gave him a new path. In that way, I think the show has given us a unique take on the Spider-Man lore, and I commend them for some excellent writing. Other than that, the episode was pretty typical superhero fare. Otto teams up with Spider-Man to take out Crimson Dynamo, who happens to be female this time. She's an adaptation of a more recent successor to the Dynamo name, of which there are many, who first appeared in Hulk, Winter Guard issue 1. Her armor here looks a lot less, stupid than in the comics. It's like she has a TV for a helmet. It did feel like Spidey was having a really hard time against this Dynamo character. I don't think it should have been necessarily easy, but I do think the writers made her such a difficult foe to help justify needing Doc Ock. It's not a huge deal, it's just something I noted as I watched. The Rise of Doc Ock Part 1 may not be the greatest episode of the show, but it does entertain as it should, and it gives us a nice taste of things to come. Maybe this arc won't be as awful as I had feared. Tune in tomorrow for my review of Part 2. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. I just want to briefly remind you all to check out my award show video. A link will be below and in the card in the top right corner. Thanks. On to the review. Man, oh man, this is a good episode. It has action, awkward one-liners, and giant kaiju. What more could you really ask for? The big thing that shocked me about this episode was how, after freaking 60 years, the writers actually managed to do something new with Curt Connors, aka the Lizard, that I'd never seen before. How's that even possible? Another benefit to the science angle the series often has is that it provided at least one of these things. The Lizard being able to condense himself through a sewer grate. I know that's pretty small as new things go, but I'd never actually seen or heard of him doing that before. It's a really neat detail. Oh, and the Lizard becomes Godzilla basically in this episode. That's certainly the bigger of the new takes on the character I was referring to. Again, I gotta congratulate the writers on taking the mythos in a new direction that doesn't feel completely at odds with the source material. Last episode, I asked how Otto would turn to the dark side, and this episode definitely answers that. He's betrayed by Norman, who initiates a series of actions that ultimately leads to Otto leaving Horizon and coming to work with him, while also severing his heroic ties with Spider-Man and Miles. It's certainly fun to see how devious and manipulative Osborn is in this series. Yes, the previous iteration did the same too, but it just feels far more cold and calculated than the other show. Maybe it's the voice actor. He does an amazing job. Also, another complaint that I've had was Miles being introduced as a hero too soon. I still don't agree with them introducing him so early, and I never will, but it's nice to see the resulting stories aren't atrocious with him in it. He really shouldn't be on a similar humor level to Peter, but I did enjoy the interactions this episode, especially the part at the end of the episode. So far, this story arc has turned out 2 high-quality episodes. In Ultimate Spider-Man, this is normally where the quality dips, or the premise isn't used to its fullest potential. It'll be interesting to see how the remaining 2 episodes turn out. That's it for me. I'll see you next week for parts 3 and 4. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Well, looky here. Once again, Archaic King has fallen behind on videos. In my defense, I was working hard on Scooby Month, which I also fell behind on. Okay, so I have no excuse. But to make up for it, here are my brief thoughts on episode 17 and 18. Starting with episode 17, The Rise of Doc Ock, Part 3, which weirdly didn't center much around Ock at all. More on Peter's quest to reveal to Harry that his father is a villain. It's a really good episode either way. The conflict between Harry and Peter has now reached its peak now that he knows Peter is connected to Spidey somehow, and it's heartbreaking and entertaining to watch. Even the action somewhat takes a back seat to this, though it is still present and well done. Seeing an almost proto-Sinister Six in action is pretty cool. Episode 18, The Rise of Doc Ock Part 4, does indeed serve as the final chapter to his rise to villainy. I just wish it had, more to do with him than what we got. Which, by the way, was still a good episode. I just wouldn't have included it as part of a story arc titled The Rise of Doc Ock. He's in the episode, as are his Sinister Five, but this was more of the beginning of Harry's rise to villainy, kinda, as well as Norman's possible origins as the Green Goblin, or something akin to that. That would really be my only complaint to these final 2 episodes to this story. They didn't have as much to do with Dr. Octopus than was advertised, but the episode was still fun. The team up between Gwen, Harry, and Peter in the beginning, as well as the raw emotion of Norman's supposed death. That's what makes a good Spider-Man story, in my opinion. And that's it from me. What did you think of these 2 episodes? Let me know down below. And I'd like to take this time to thank my patrons for supporting me over on Patreon. So, thanks to Yasmin, I hope that's how you pronounce your name, I really appreciate it. If you'd like to see how you can become a patron and get early access to these videos and get more of a say in what I cover on this channel, links to my Patreon will be down below and at the end of the video. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Well, here it is. This show's introduction of Spider-Gwen, Marvel's overnight success story that everyone was talking about one day, and now you don't really hear a peep out of. To not repeat myself endlessly, I'll just say it here at the start. I'm not a fan of introducing characters such as Spider-Gwen this early into the show, even if it's supposed to be a creative choice. It doesn't seem like the kind of choice you make if you think you'll get several seasons, but rather, you know you don't have much time, so you cram it into one season. Peter's early days, I think, should be about him figuring himself out or exploring his powers. He shouldn't also have to deal with other spiders. That being said, episode 19, Spider Island Part 1, it's not a bad episode. I just had that particular complaint about it. Well, I also suppose I'm a little iffy on how she was introduced, too. Just randomly out of nowhere, already a skilled fighter, somehow didn't design herself a mask, so by episode's end, everyone knows her true identity. At least we know now that the show will literally be calling her Spider-Gwen. But, no, yeah, rest of the episode was fine. I like the characters having to deal with Stealth Spider, who I guess was Osborn, right? He even turned into a spider at the end, so maybe he has spider powers now? I mean, I think that's pretty obvious. I don't even know, they'll probably answer that in episode 20. Newsflash, they didn't. Speaking of, episode 20, Spider Island Part 2. The episode where everyone does Spider-Man's job better than him. Why is this show called Spider-Man again? It's also the episode where characters literally fawn over Black Widow, and bad guys can only handle her stare for so long before cracking under pressure. Because what better way to show how cool a character is than by stating it? Also, Black Widow looks like crap. Whoever okayed that hairstyle is not firing on all cylinders, in my opinion. It's like someone took a lawnmower to her head, jeez. Hydra's in this episode too. Weirdly enough, they ditched their original color scheme and now they look like Shredder's Foot Clan. Interesting choice there. But once again, the action scenes are pretty top-notch, especially once everyone has spider powers to complement their fighting styles. And when Anya gets her powers, she actually needs to, guess what? Acclimate to them. Where was that with Gwen? That's at least one positive the episode has going for it. The other thing is the Spider Gang at the end. At first it was a little cringy, I thought, but it ended up being kind of cool. Plus the end teases the big twist of the comic book source material, which is everyone turning into giant spider monsters. Can't wait to see that play out. So in the end, episode 20 is just okay, I guess. I think parts of it could really have been better. That's it for me. What did you think of these episodes? Let me know down below. I'd like to take this time to thank my patrons for supporting me on Patreon, so thanks to Yasmin, I really appreciate it. If you'd like to see how you can become a patron and get early access to videos and get more of a say in what I cover on this channel, links to my Patreon will be down below. Thanks for watching. Take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Disney XD has decided to just release 3 episodes all at once because that's a smart decision. Doesn't seem like you're rushing through the rest of the season. I hate having to do this, but instead of 3 separate reviews, even though that would certainly get me more views, I will be somewhat briefly reviewing each episode in one video. Now, I believe I said in my previous reviews that Spider Island was not off to the best of starts. The episodes weren't both horrible, just that I was let down by them in different ways. Whether it was a poor introduction of Spider-Gwen, or an episode that featured characters being better at being Spider-Man than himself. With episode 21, I'd say things are a little bit better. I don't quite have that many complaints regarding part 3 of this story arc. The better part of the episode is spent on Peter and friends hunting down a monster Gwen and dealing with Kraven's return. It was a fun half hour, and the fight between Peter and Kraven was maybe not the most dynamic action scene I've ever seen from an action cartoon, but I did like how it was choreographed, if that's the correct term here. Next is episode 22, part 4 of the Spider Island arc. I don't have as much to say about this particular episode. It's really good. Some positives are the Jackal making for a terrific villain, thanks in part to his voice actor, which I think is John DiMaggio, maybe? And Anya is just wonderful in this episode. She's gotten the hang of her powers and just seems like a much better character than she was when first introduced. The progression of the Spider Island story is also coming along nicely, too. It's not anything too clever, but it's written fairly well, with the exception of part 2 anyways. There's a few moments where the animation seems to lag, and as another fan pointed out, the slow motion parts do more to highlight some janky animation than highlight something amazing. And then moving on to the finale, and what a finale it is! Though the wrap up to the whole episode was a tad on the quick side, not really a huge complaint, I just wanted to check in on everyone, it still managed to be bombastic throughout. Anya continued to be a great addition to the team, in a way even better than Gwen, really. The episode was appropriately tense as our heroes were down to the literal wire to stop a bomb from exploding, and we may have seen the final split between Peter and Harry now that Pete's identity is known to him. It's not uncommon for Spider-Man stories to have these two at odds, no matter the interpretation, and with the final minutes of the episode teasing the birth of the Hobgoblin, I'm intrigued to see how the show's writers will tackle it. Despite Harry's hatred of Spider-Man starting off poorly in terms of writing and execution, the last few episodes have definitely handled it rather well. I am worried about the Hobgoblin coming before the Green Goblin, though. I'm just nitpicky that way, you know? Maybe it's a slight homage to Spider-Man the Animated Series. In that show, they, for some reason, couldn't use the Green Goblin at the time, or some dumb reason, and so the Hobgoblin showed up first. Either way, I believe that is the next story that we're going to be getting, so we won't have long to wait. And that finishes up my review of the Spider Island story arc. It didn't start off on the best of feet, but by the end, it certainly ended up sticking the landing. Let me know if you liked or disliked this story, and what you'd like to see from the coming episodes. And now, I would like to take this time to thank my patrons over on Patreon for supporting me and the channel. So, thanks to Yasmin, I really appreciate it. If you'd like to see how you can become a patron and get early access to videos too, or get more of a say in what I cover on this channel, links to my Patreon will be down below. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. It seems that these 2 episodes are probably the finale to Spider-Man Season 1. So, how are they? Let's find out. The finale to Spider-Man is off to a rather decent start with the Hobgoblin Part 1. After the event of the previous arc, it doesn't take much to send Harry after Spidey when he's fooled into thinking he's turned evil, thanks to a little mind control by Doc Ock. And while the various fights throughout the episode, typical of these Sinister Six storylines, were nothing awful, I do balk a little at how they handled Peter versus Harry as Hobgoblin. Not in terms of the action, but the writing itself. Harry was livid at Peter last episode, and even at the start of this one. Enough that, with very little prodding from his sick father, Harry donned the Hobgoblin suit and went to take Spider-Man out. If you're expecting this to play a huge role, it doesn't seem to. Very quickly, Harry learns it's just mind control, and helps his friend snap out of it. And then their friendship seems to, more or less, end up back together again by the episode's end. It's weird to build up this animosity between the characters and not really do all that much with it. Unless Norman breaks the 2 apart in the second half of the finale, this feels like some cheap writing. There's also the matter of Doc Ock's plan in the episode. Other than roping Peter into his new Sinister Six, Otto doesn't seem to have that much of a plan beyond terrorizing New York City and stealing money. Potentially to fund some project of his? It could get a spotlight in part 2, but as far as this first one goes, it just felt underexplained. This isn't a huge complaint here, but I also don't quite get Ock using the name Steel Spider for one of his minions. Yes, the character does don that mantle in the comics, but he was initially Ock's biggest fan, and thus modeled himself after his idol. He doesn't even look like a spider in the episode. I suppose he had to have a name, and Kid Ock probably wouldn't really make sense, but still, it's just something that slightly irked me. Now, everything I just said sounds fairly negative, but the episode itself was fairly entertaining if light on story development. The show's never been that dynamic with its action scenes. The slow motion is overused and doesn't do what they think it does, and the backgrounds during scenes are blurred to compensate for how crappy the 3D models are. But this episode had some good ones. Though I feel like a bit more could have been done to highlight Peter being worn down by the Sinister Five. In general, it's not a horrible start to the 2-part finale, and I'll be interested to see how the final episode of the season holds up. What about you? Any thoughts on this episode? Leave them down below. And now I'd like to take time to thank my patrons over on Patreon for supporting me. So, thank you to Yasmin. I really appreciate it. If you'd like to see how you can become a patron and get early access to videos and get more of a say in what I cover on this channel, links to my Patreon will be down below. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Well, here's the season finale, at least that's what I'm being told, of Marvel's Spider-Man. Is it any good? Does it fall on its face? Honestly, it's okay. It's not the explosive ending or even really the emotional conclusion to the season that I was thinking we'd get. After last episode, Harry and Peter have cleaned up the mess Ock has made and recaptured most of the Sinister Six. Everything is looking good until Harry supposedly attacks Spider-Man and accuses him of being a menace. We the viewers are then left to imagine that he turned bad, or later that he's subconsciously doing these things, which if you know your Spidey lore isn't remotely a far-fetched concept. The major conflict is this little mini-mystery, and it's fine, but it just never lives up to the concept, in my personal opinion. It's fairly obvious who is really behind the villainous Hobgoblin mask, and even the reveal just sort of lacks. The writers attempt drama and emotion in this episode, but it just never clicked for me. Harry blacking out? yawn. Norman seemingly getting killed again. Been there, done that. Hobgoblin Part 2 isn't a terrible episode, but it feels like it's just there. To steal another person's quote, it doesn't really garner any negative or positive reaction from me. It just exists. In other words, I'm neither thrilled nor angry with the episode. I feel like so much more could have been done in this two-part storyline, though. Honestly, the two episodes, besides dealing with Harry as the Hobgoblin, seem completely divorced from each other, that to call this Part 2 seems dishonest. It's similar to how the later episodes of The Rise of Doc Ock just didn't feel part of a storyline at all. Even the cliffhanger and the hints of green seen towards the end are not enough to get me excited for what's to come next. The shift from Norman dying, or whatever happened to him, to Harry more or less fine in the next scene is fairly jarring. Like I said, I think more should have been done in these two episodes that we never end up getting. If these are the two final episodes of the season, the show ended its inaugural run with a whimper, and not a bang. And that is incredibly disappointing. And now I'd like to take the time to thank my patrons over on Patreon for supporting me. So thank you to Yasmin, I really appreciate it. If you'd like to see how you could become a patron and get early access to my videos and get more of a say in what I cover on this channel, link to my Patreon will be down below. Thanks for watching, and take care.